If you like audiobooks or audio shows, check out a free trial of Audible. Just click the link in the description.
Welcome to Mind Shack. This is your host, Bruce McGuire, and you are listening to part 2 of the epic showdown between David Whitehead and the clearly mentally disabled Josh here. Again, we can't be too harsh on him. He's clearly got a mental disability. I don't know how he found his way onto this podcast to do this debate, but whatever. And the controversial Nathan Oakley. 1 second, he's calm, giving excellent explanations in a logical fashion. Another moment, he's just triggered, screaming "my bad" a million times in a row. So this is actually about to descend into absolute and utter chaos. Like some people enjoy that when that happens in flat Earth debates. That's why they watch them. And of course, we also have Patrick Gunnels here. He's relatively well grounded, not a lot of fallacies. Pretty solid debater here. So let's see if we can get through this without well, some people like the the insanity. So I'll be calling out the fallacies, of course. Got on the counters here. Fallacies, zingers, explanations. Make sure you check out part 1 to see where it's all going, and plenty of other logical analysis and breakdown on the Mind Shock channel. If you want to help support logic and reason in a world where it's quickly going extinct, you can donate to our PayPal. Just check the link in the description. You can also become a YouTube member right here on YouTube. Access to exclusive streams and chats help support the channel that way. Make sure you subscribe, like, and share. Twitter, Facebook, Reddit, Patreon. Questions, comments, theories, non-suggestions, rebuttals, debunkings of any kind, leave them in the comment section.
I mean, one of the oldest things that actually, let me go to the audience because they have some of these questions. I'll just throw them in and I'll let you guys chew them apart. So, number 1, why can't you see Polaris from the southern hemisphere or Sigma Octantis from the northern hemisphere?
So
that's the first question.
Hemisphere is a begging the question fallacy again, like atmosphere. It's assuming that Polaris isn't visible from the bottom half of a sphere. Meanwhile, the maps and models are derived from elevation angle measurements to Polaris. So the flat maps and flat models, including the globe, which is converted from these elevation angle measurements to Polaris by way of something called the Haversine formula, which converts flat Earth elevation angle measurements to Polaris to give you latitude lines onto a globe spherical surface. And if you're going to do celestial navigation, you have to convert it back from the flat map, not through Haversine and the globe, onto the celestial sphere, which is the dome of the vision you have when you're on a flat ocean at the equatorial plane, which is how you measure these angles. So to ask how we beg the question of being on the bottom antipodal on a hemisphere to see Polaris, when the very concept of the equator itself is based on the minimum angle you can see Polaris with. So at the equator, you're measuring a flat Earth angle to Polaris at its minimum, i.e. where Polaris is on the horizon. And as you move further towards the centre, i.e. towards the North Pole, the angle to Polaris, that's a flat Earth angle measurement, increases as you approach Polaris, i.e. it goes up and up and up in the sky. Well, that's a flat Earth angle that you're asking about for a flat Earth concept, the equator, and then imposing your begging the question hemispherical assumption onto that flat Earth derivation to ask me how we can't see it off the bottom of your assumption that we dangle off the bottom of a sphere.
You know what's weird? If David Whitehead really is being intellectually honest, like it seems he is being, if Nathan Oakley wasn't so freaking obnoxious, I think he might have actually come a lot of ways into not necessarily convincing David Whitehead that the Earth is flat, but dispersing the fallacies of the arguments Whitehead thinks are legitimate for supporting the globe. But because he's being this level of obnoxious and aggressive, it loses a lot of the argument. Now, some people think I'm obnoxious and aggressive, and that's perfectly fine. But as I explained, there's a difference between responding in kind, like some of these goofs like McToon or so-called Professor Dave. The mental capacity doesn't seem to be there to understand, and they're the ones being obnoxious and aggressive. So Nathan Oakley would be perfectly justified in having this type of debate and discussion and firing back and, exposing those goofs in this manner. But again, against a poor mentally disabled guy like Josh and a very, very polite, supposedly open-minded individual like Whitehead, I don't think these tactics are necessarily the best, and it makes him look bad, even if what he's saying is accurate.
Crap question.
It's also
No.
important.
Do you have a picture of the map that you agree upon as to being a map of the flat Earth? Do you have
All of
anything
them
like
are flat. You show me a globe-shaped map.
No. I'm asking.
I answered you. All of them.
Change.
All of them. They're all flat. Do you know why? Because they need to work with elevation angles. That's why all maps are flat. If you're at sea and you're using a map to navigate, you're going to measure one line along the ground and one line to the star. That's an angle. Then you're going to draw a circle on a map. That's why it's flat. That's why they're not globe-shaped. You can't do celestial navigation on a curved surface because you can't acquire an elevation angle from a curve. It's an angle. It's two straight lines. That's why they're all flat. So now you've asked me, do you want to show me your globe-shaped map that anybody navigated with ever? Because there isn't one. They're all flat for a reason. So you can navigate with them with the flat Earth elevation angle measurement off a flat plane that you'll be getting from a sextant.
Josh, why do they flatten out maps?
I just told you. Is it like I'm not
What's your
here?
opinion?
Is it I
I
say
wanna
something
know.
and then you appeal to someone else?
Hey, I'm asking a question.
Yeah. Is it okay if we ask questions?
Yeah, no. Go ahead, Josh.
Yeah. Well, because our perception, right? Maybe there's a way to look at this in a different way. Is we're all talking about how we perceive reality. Am I correct on that? Is how we
No, we were
perceive
talking about
reality?
maps and I was answering him, but now we could talk about something else because you don't know.
I came in. Well, that's one. I came in at the middle of the conversation because I was letting my kids in the door.
All right, do you want me to fill you in? We were talking about maps and how they're derived from flat Earth elevation angle measurements to Polaris to give you latitude. Obviously, you're not an exact expert on this subject. Meanwhile, I know what the hell I'm talking about. Do you want to carry on talking about this with me, Dave? Or do you want to hand it over to your host who doesn't know anything about it?
This is you know
I want to have Josh's. I just want to ask his opinion on it. He
doesn't know.
I just want to
You're
know.
not clear.
what
He
his
doesn't
opinion
know.
is.
Well,
No,
let's find
Nathan.
out.
Let's find out. Why don't you shut up for a sec and let's find out? How about that?
it goes back to the same thing that we've been talking about this whole time, and we're never going to come to an agreement on.
Profound.
Is that the
Profound.
perception of curve.
Nathan, shut up.
Yeah.
I'm going to
The
mute you.
perception of curve. Okay.
Now Whitehead looks like he's getting triggered. Although, to be fair, this might be one of the only times where a globe earther might be justifiably triggered. I mean, look at Nathan Oakley's face. It's like he was trolling on purpose. But again, why would you troll a guy with a mental disability like Josh? I mean, it's just so rude. Like, again, it's like a high schooler pushing around elementary school kids. Like, why would you do that? I mean, you gotta be a troll to be doing that. And just because you're a troll doesn't mean you're not correct or your arguments are fallacious, but, I mean, it's just not cool.
Okay. Is not realized with eye length distance to the horizon. And so early navigators, they produce flat Earths. We still produce flat maps today. What's wrong with that?
'Cause
Doesn't
you
prove
claim
that
we're on
the
a sphere?
Earth is flat. What's that?
Because you claim we're on a sphere. He's asking me about these flat maps. Like,
I didn't ask you anything. I'm asking Josh. But there's utilitarian reasons why they would put it onto a map for the ability to do these things. But that doesn't mean it scales to the fact that it's saying that the Earth itself is flat. It's
why is that?
It's a utilitarian
Oh, really?
purpose.
Why is
But
that?
that's what
Well,
I'm
maybe you can tell us why.
Nathan, I'm talking to Josh.
I'm just asking,
talking
are we
to
allowed
Josh,
to ask
man.
questions? I'm just asking why that would
No,
be. Why
because
would they scale
I'm
it
trying
to a
get
flat
Josh
map?
to answer it,
Maybe
so
you
I'm
could
gonna
tell
mute
me.
you.
Why is that?
And Josh, could you give it a shot there? Go ahead.
Well, no, you're right. Is that there's many reasons why we use a flat map. I mean, navigators weren't going to go out there and just create. Some of them had globes, but it's hard to navigate on that for the exact reasons that Nathan said. Is because when you're looking at the horizon on perspective, it appears horizontal. I've agreed with this. I have not said this wasn't the case. I said the reason why it appears horizontal is because we have a limited perspective to the horizon, and that the curvature of the Earth is negligible towards that horizon.
Oh, that's the end of my time in
perspective.
this discussion, clearly.
Okay.
This is what I'm trying to say. Is like we're all like observing the same phenomena.
No worries.
So for my audience, this is what happens when you point out that the host of the show hasn't got the slightest fucking idea what he's talking about. The co-host wants to hand across to him because I'm proving a flat Earth. Meanwhile, I'm getting muted while this dick waffles on about absolutely nothing interesting.
I think I'm probably accurately describing your position on this. Then David comes with this Lake Pontchartrain photo and says, this is evidence of the horizon being Earth curve. Then shows the Walter Bislin calculator that includes lots of other atmospheric conditions and it says the horizon is Earth curve. I'm not really understanding why you're persisting with this claim that we're not going to see an Earth curve horizon when all the globers are talking about why they're seeing Earth curve horizon.
But see, I don't want to get into the topic of optics of what we're seeing with reflection, refraction, all of this other stuff, right? How various different densities in the atmosphere cause an amplification.
It's like this Josh guy just memorized or he heard people use the words, so now he's just using them without actually having any understanding of anything. But again, I mean, you know, not to attack the guy. I mean, just look at his face. I mean, clearly he has some kind of severe mental disability. He's not grasping anything, but it's still not cool to attack the guy because of it.
Of the light that we're seeing, I don't want to get into that argument. All I'm trying to talk about here was in this perspective of the curvature of what we were talking about. Now, Patrick, I have stated this over and over and over again. If you take the circumference of the Earth and divide it by 360, which is a circle, the number you get is about 69, right? 69 miles. So if you take in miles, 24,000 miles divided by 360, you get about 69 miles. That means that every 1 degree, so for the globe Earth, for every 1 degree, and I was saying 75 because that was my approximation, about 75. 69 miles is what you should see in the sense of 1% of...
I've already covered this, but that's why I've been muted and removed from the conversation, because 1 degree is a flat Earth elevation angle measurement. I'm not allowed to interrupt to point this out, so the guy's going to reiterate his incorrect nonsense with me on mute.
8 inches over 1 mile squared is distributed through that 1 mile. It's not 1 mile drop 8 inches. And this is what a lot of people do believe. I'm not saying that's what you believe, but this is what a lot of people do.
See, meanwhile, me and Patrick have covered this 4 or 5 times on their behalf, and the host has denied it. 1.2 times the square root of the observer's height in feet. Completely ignored, didn't understand it. Now he's waffling on through the same incorrect shit he's mentioned 3 or 4 times.
Understand why we're still on this topic if we can agree to disagree on this. Let's move on to the other various points.
75 miles. 75 squared, what is that? 5,625 times 2/3. We're going to call that 4,000 feet, give or take. Maybe 3,900 feet over 75 miles. That was your approximation. 3,900 feet is how much curvature of the Earth would block a person on point A, 75 miles distant from point B.
And you could see from Josh's face, like, there's just no comprehension of anything going on. Like, there's just nothing going on between the ears. And again, it's not his fault. Like, you know, he's mentally disabled. I mean, you know, somebody who can't walk, I mean, they can't walk if they, you know, if they're quadriplegic or whatever. They can't walk. You just can't magically expect them to be able to walk. Like, why would you pull them out of a wheelchair and try to force them to play a big game of basketball or compete in a race around a track? Why would you do this? Like, why are they doing this to Josh? Like, I don't like, this is inhumane. Like, how does Patrick not understand that Josh is incapable of understanding this point or any of the other points? Like, how does he not get that?
You wouldn't be able to see anything shorter than 3,900 feet in height. That is a geometric reality, okay? So you may call it just 1 degree, but it still requires approximately 3,900 feet of blocking curvature. You just draw a circle. Say, okay, the distance is 1 degree over these 360. The actual curvature skipped over is 3,900 feet. It's enormous.
3,900 feet is just a little over a mile. And we're talking about 1 mile squared, right?
So, I mean, I don't even want to keep going now. This is just really sad. I mean, the poor guy doesn't even know how many feet are in a mile. I mean, or does he just not know basic numbers? Like, 3,900 is not greater than 5,280. I mean, he's making mentally disabled people look bad. I mean, there are people with severe mental disabilities who do know how many feet are in a mile, or at least know the order of numbers. They're not going to think that 5,280 is a smaller number than 3,900. So, I mean, what do we get? Like, how is this supposed to be dissected here? It's so sad. And what is even more sad, that these other guys with functioning brains, they either can't recognize that Josh has a severe mental disability. I mean, this guy isn't even on what? A 4-year-old level mentally? I mean, sure, he memorized some words, but I mean, 4-year-olds can regurgitate big words they heard. They don't know what they mean necessarily. Clearly, Josh doesn't know any of the words meaning that he used. He doesn't even know basic numbers. I mean, what can we do with this? Not to mention, to think that even 3,900 feet is negligible. I mean, the world's tallest building isn't even 2,900 feet. The Burj Khalifa is 2,722 feet to the tip. So he thinks that's nothing. So curvature that would block the tallest buildings in the world. This poor mentally disabled, I mean, again, he's giving mentally disabled people a bad name here. I mean, we could get tons of mentally disabled people who would do a lot better on this podcast than Josh. So it's not just about Josh now. Now he's giving all mentally disabled people a bad name. Because he's embarrassing, not only completely humiliating himself, but all mentally disabled people. This is really sad. That's why, like, a lot of times when I say I put people on a 4-year-old mental level, that might be insulting to certain 4-year-olds. Because some of these so-called semi-functioning adults, like Josh, they really, there's 4-year-olds out there that could be at a much higher mental level. So I don't know if that's the most accurate way to put it. But it's just really sad. So no matter how you put it, whether he knows or doesn't know what a mile is, whether he knows or doesn't know which numbers come first, when you're talking in the thousands of feet, to think that that's nothing, to think that the curvature wouldn't block the tallest buildings in the world, I mean, this is just insanity. Like, what are we supposed to do with this logical analysis? I mean, it's just crazy.
First of all,
We're talking about our thing. Patrick, have you ever been to Denver, Colorado, and came in from Kansas? Okay, Denver, Colorado is the mile-high city, right? 5,280 feet. So we're a bit under a mile with that 3,900. 5,280, 1 mile. Okay, the Colorado Rockies, some of those are 14,000 feet, but they're sitting in an elevation of a mile up. So they're 5,280 and then 10,000, 14,000 feet. Okay. If there's no curvature to the earth, when should, using trigonometry, geometry here, when should I begin to see them coming from Kansas into Denver, Colorado?
Well,
and
that's
it's about 380 miles from the border of Kansas to Denver.
Okay, so that's why you take the square root of the observer's height.
So the thing we've told him a dozen times, but I'm not allowed to point out again.
Computation is done for a sphere of circumference of 24,901 English statute miles. So if you're at 30,000 feet, you're on an airplane, right? You take the square root of 30,000 feet. What is that? 175? What's 175 squared? Is it 30,000 roughly? So anyway,
It's 3625.
Okay. Anyway, wow. I got it way wrong. So call it 160, call it 170. So 170 times 1.225, right? Okay. So you should not be able to see further than 200 miles from 30,000 feet on a globe of radius 3959. Jay Tolan Media is showing infrared photos from 30,000 feet of elevation,
but that is
well over 500 miles.
Perspective, right? That's assuming on a flat Earth, right? If the Earth is flat, but we also have to take into account elevation, correct? I mean, so we all agree that the Earth has sea level. It can go up hundreds and thousands of feet in the sense of topography. We all agree upon that?
Sea level. So the elevation of the mountain is in reference to sea level, correct? 0 would be sea level?
Yes.
Level.
Yes, that's what I'm saying. Is if
Flat.
we took the where the sea meets land is 0. Okay, where the sea meets land is 0. If we account for that, and we say that the Earth has elevation in the sense that we climb up hills, we can go up mountains. Are we all in agreement that the Earth has different elevations?
Yes, with reference to a zero baseline, a flat Earth.
Okay.
Yes.
Thank you. Appreciate it. So what I'm trying to say is if I'm coming in from Kansas and Denver, Colorado is the mile-high city, so it sits at 5,280 feet elevation.
I mean, you got to be proud of this guy, man. At least he knows at least some of the states in the country. I mean, that's cool. That's cool. He knows some states. I mean, props. Just, you know.
And I have a mountain that is in Colorado that is 14,000 feet high, or 14,000 feet high. When should I be able to see that? And you're saying it depends on the height. Yes, the height of the observer is to the horizon, not at objects that are above the horizon massively. Especially a landmass that is going to move up and elevate upward 1 mile from that ground level.
Okay.
When should I expect to see Denver, Colorado, from Kansas on a flat Earth? If we're talking about elevation, it's 1 mile up, and then there's mountains above it that are 10,000 feet up. Okay, if I'm coming from Kansas, if I'm looking at the horizon, that's fine. My height does matter. But if I'm looking at an object that is above the horizon in elevation, when should I be able to see that?
Okay, I'll answer. So in your mathematics, including the Walter Bisling calculator, there's no accounting for perspective. So according to globe Earth mathematics, the height is irrelevant because the height in
But Patrick just said it was relevant.
So the height in globe Earth mathematics is irrelevant because the distance of the mountain versus the height of the mountain given in feet won't change with observer distance. So in globe Earth maths, it doesn't matter if the mountain's 10 miles away or 1 mile away, it's always calculated at the same feet or meters value. Ergo, the size, that's apparent size, angular size, perspective, does not change with distance. Hence my description of it being a begging the question proof of, I think, perspective hijacking Earth curve calculator. Because where things reduce in size, that's angular size, perspective, and then get obscured from view because they become too small to see, the globe Earth mass, which excludes and hijacks perspective, claims that it will disappear from view, it's only about the 10th time, at 1.22 times the square root of the observer's height in feet. That's the point that the geometric claim of an Earth curve that obscures your view when you ignore perspective will block the view of the mountain.
I mean, this is rough. It's like they're still pulling this quadriplegic out of the chair to try to get him to, you know, play some defense. In a basketball game, he's not capable of doing it. Like, what is Nathan why does Nathan Oakley keep trying to explain this to Josh, who's made it perfectly clear that he can't grasp anything? Why is he still going? I mean, I don't know. I don't know what to make of this.
That's why when people charge flat earthers with, why can't you see New York from Ireland, when they claim Earth curve at 1.22 times the square root of the observer's height in feet is getting in the way, when in reality, New York's very small at that distance. It's perspective, just excluded from Earth curve mathematics.
Thank you, Nathan.
Can I just ask a quick question here?
Go ahead.
When I'm sitting here, because I live in the British Columbia, live right by the ocean, and I, on a regular basis, witness when boats are going and they're disappearing bottom up. Okay.
I wonder if Josh is paying attention here. Because Josh is stating that you would never... I mean, again, I can't attack this poor guy. I mean, attacking somebody with a mental disability, that's just not cool. We can't do it. But if he is capable of processing basic concepts, it would be curious. I mean, I want him to respond. Nathan actually called him out on it, and he just didn't respond. I mean, it's just kind of weird. Or started spinning stories that have nothing to do with anything. It's just, yeah, I mean, this whole thing is really tough.
Yeah, this is one of the oldest observations. So, yeah, so if we're talking about it disappearing on a flat plane, the vanishing point, the whole ship, the whole boat should disappear in entirety. It would not disappear bottom up.
Why not? Again, false dichotomy, false cause. Also, we haven't really talked about this either, but I brought this fallacy up on a few other debates. A reductive logical fallacy. I should bring it up even more, because that's when you're reducing an argument to a point where you're just ignoring all the variables. You know, things called waves. I mean, maybe people have heard of that. I mean, I think David Weiss said wave front edge or whatever in his debate with Brian Meyer. It doesn't matter what you call it. Now, the thing is, this is all so very simple, it can make one's brain explode to even examine this topic logically. Because if you're sitting at a lake, at the beach, whatever, I mean, put a kayak in the water on a beach 2 feet in front of your face when you're sitting right on the edge of where or standing right, doesn't matter, sitting, stand. I mean, actually, this is a good experiment. Why don't you lay down right in front? Like, people have probably even done this, obviously not as an experiment. When you're a kid, you might lay down on the beach right in front of the waves and the waves splash on you. I mean, people do that with their feet, right? They sit at the edge, at the beachfront, lakefront, whatever. And the water comes forward and backward. What happens when you get your head closer to the ground level? If somebody is in a kayak, are you going to see part of a wave blocking the bottom part of a kayak? This isn't rocket science. I mean, this is so simple. Why would you hallucinate that waves wouldn't exist in the great distance so the boat would have to disappear immediately? Why would you hallucinate? Again, David Whitehead just does not seem to understand the difference between a true horizon and an apparent horizon. I mean, he needs to really study some of these mirages like Fata Morgana. I mean, boats literally look like they're floating. Obviously, they're not floating. Obviously not. It's just there's something called precipitation. You know? So that's why in great distances over water, you cannot tell where the true horizon is. Just like train tracks look like they touch in the distance, they don't actually touch. Why does this even need to be discussed? That's what's so sad about all of this. Because these are basics that children can understand, but we're spending literal hours on like 4-year-old concepts. I mean, this is just rough, mind-shocking, if you will.
That's where my question is just putting math aside for a second.
Okay, do you want me to explain that to you?
Observations that have been made for 2,000 years on this.
Okay, I got you. Do you want me to explain that? Can I explain? Can I explain? Can I explain that to you?
Can I take this one?
I wanted to respond to Nathan's response to me, if I could do that first, because I think
can I just address this bottom-up
misunderstanding.
obstruction of the boats before you do? So you're describing something.
I would like to, before we move on to that part, because we're talking about two different observational
I'm sorry, Josh.
Okay?
Then that's my fault.
Right.
So, okay, address that and then Nathan right to you,
right.
okay?
The question I asked was on a flat Earth, not on a round Earth. And Nathan, you explained it very well in the sense of a round Earth, 1.1225, right? You explained it on a round Earth. I asked on a flat Earth, coming from Kansas, looking at the edge of the flat Earth, towards the edge of the flat Earth, and I have an elevation of 5,280 feet, and then another elevation of mountains that are 14,000 feet high. When should I expect to see them?
What edge is he talking about? Does he just mean looking in the distance? Like, well, again, I really just should stop trying to understand anything Josh says, but yeah.
Okay, I'll try and rephrase what I said about a globe Earth, but to answer your question.
I don't want to hear about a globe Earth.
I know,
want to
I'm
know
going to rephrase what I said about a
perspective of what we should hear
I got that.
on a flat Earth. How does that observation
got you.
happen?
I heard.
When should I see it?
Thank you. I do need you to stop talking while I answer you, though, if that's okay.
I just want to be clear that we know what we're talking about here in the sense of the question
I
being
heard.
asked.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. I'll try again.
Mm-hmm.
So you're giving me the height of the mountain in feet, and feet or meters don't change with distance. That's an angular change. So the angle of the mountain would change as you approached it.
I do have to give Nathan Oakley credit here. I mean, he's switched to talking really slow. This is more useful, obviously, with someone like Whitehead, because, I mean, Josh hasn't really shown any kind of mental capacity of any kind, so it's probably not going to help. But I have to give Nathan Oakley props here. I mean, he switched to talking really slow. So, I mean, we'll see where this goes.
Not the feet and inches as you've given me in your question, making your question malformed. Now, I've answered your question in regards to why you've posed it to me as well, which is in globe Earth maths, the assertion that 1.22 times the square root of the observer's height in feet will be the limitation of your view to Earth curve obstruction would only have the mountain in feet and inches not change in angular size as you approach it. So based on the information you've given me, I can't take that hypothetical scenario and put a sextant to the mountain to give me its angular size. There's not enough information. It's a malformed question in that regard. But in terms of a globe, I can answer and point out that there's no perspective in the question. But as you're approaching things, they get bigger. Not in Earth curve maths, they don't.
Like aspect ratio. I understand that. I understand what you were saying on the globe Earth side. And the reason I'm asking this question is because if we assume that the Earth is flat and we do have elevation, right, and there is no curvature, then at what distance away from that object, using flat Earth math, would I expect to see that? And if I can get maybe after the show when you guys can go out there and calculate that would be great to hear that answer. And because what I'm asking actually, Nathan, is an experiment that we can all do. We can go to Kansas. I can drive into Denver, and I can test what you guys would postulate would be the actual answer, correct? I mean, if we know the elevation, if we know the height of the mountain, and I'm coming from Kansas, which is roughly sea level, okay? And I know I'm using globe Earth terms there, Nathan. I understand.
Sea level's not a globe Earth term.
We should know that when we should see the mountains in Denver.
Okay.
On a flat Earth.
I got it.
That's what I'm saying.
I got it.
If I wanted to test that out.
I got it the first time, the second time, and the third time. Thank you. But
well, I'm glad it.
Sure.
I'm glad
you're asking a question in regards to the optics of vision, and you can calculate where things disappear into the distance in terms of diffraction with the Rayleigh criterion if you want to look that up. But in terms of that claim, I don't need to answer it because there's no positive assertion from me that needs to explain this on a flat Earth because I'm not using it as a claim. The claim, the positive assertion that does use the horizon, is Earth curve, but we can debunk it by showing imagery that demonstrates the horizon Earth curve.
All right, let me interrupt Oakley here. From strictly yes, because in that argument, yeah, you could say that's accurate. However, this would also be fallacious because Josh, mentally disabled or not, is simply asking what would it look like on a flat Earth. The answer is easy. You don't need to say, okay, it's a malformed question, this or this, even if it is. I mean, all these semantics games are just taking away from the discussion here, from the debate of keeping it concise. He could have just said, you see, look up the visibility index. On a cloudy, foggy day, you see less. On a clear day, you see more. I mean, it's really that simple, right? I mean, it's exactly what you see outside, regardless of the shape of the Earth. Oakley's claiming it's flat, so that's what you would see if it was flat. Now, if it's a globe, you would also see that, but there's also a lot of other issues. But even as a mentally disabled individual like Josh asking this basic question, you can answer it in a non-obnoxious fashion without overcomplicating all of this, even if what you're stating happens to be true.
Beyond where it is capable of being in a physical term. So if Earth curve, as in the maths, is a hill in the way of this mountain in the distance, then that hill is at a fixed position. The hill being Earth curve in the way, blocking your view of the mountain in the distance. Well, that's all your positive globe Earth claim that we can debunk, not something that needs a burden of proof reversal fallacy using to get me to justify something that fails as a globe Earth claim. So meanwhile, to go to David's question, in terms of why the boat disappears bottom first, if you'll beg my indulgence, David, I'll take you through an example of why that happens. If I take a brick and put it a few feet away from you, you'd concede that you can see the brick, right? Hopefully you don't need to answer, you just say yes. But if I take that brick and put it, let's just say about a mile away, would you concede that you can just about make out the brick?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, if I take that same brick and put it 4 miles away, so you can see it moving towards the horizon, getting smaller and smaller and smaller, and then disappearing from view, would you concede that at 4 miles, a brick's too small to see?
Yeah, I guess because it depends on the field of vision, right? Yeah, I get where you're going, but why does it not disappear?
I've got. You just have to go with me. I beg your indulgence.
Okay, I'll go with you. I'll go with you.
Yeah, okay, I'm nearly there. So at 4 miles, you would concede a brick's too small to see. It's disappeared into the horizon because it's too small. Now, if I put a million other bricks on top of that brick and make a high-rise skyscraper, would you concede that you can see the high-rise skyscraper at 4 miles, but the brick at the bottom is still too small to see?
Right, but we're not building bricks when we're talking about a moving object on the top of the water like a boat.
Yeah, and if the Earth was a sphere radius 3959, every distance to that obstruction to the boat could be no more than 1.2 times the square root of the observer's height in feet, and we can fundamentally debunk that claim by showing imagery that has a hill, claimed to be Earth curve at the horizon, beyond the things it's supposed to be blocking. So we can debunk that claim in geometry. But the claim, in terms of explanation, I can explain why things disappear bottom up. I can explain why things disappear bottom up at the horizon by taking you through the thought experiment of getting a brick to be too small to see and then putting other bricks on top of it that you can see. The bottom brick's still not visible.
This is a non-congruent argument, even though what he said is technically true, because a boat is not a giant skyscraper. And he's talking about an object slowly moving away. The answer here, of course, is not just that waves exist in the ocean. I don't know how many people aren't aware of that. It's not just that waves exist. Because obviously, if the waves are really big, you're not going to see a little rowboat really far away. Or even a bigger boat, depending on the distance and the size of the waves, right? If the waves are really, really tiny, on a day when the waves are much smaller, you will see some of the boat, right? Because the waves aren't blocking it. There's only two things at play here. The waves in the way and the atmos condition. If you don't want to use the word atmosphere, the atmos conditions, the conditions of the level of humidity and all of these things, the amount of precipitation in the air that's causing the bleed into, my bad, there's three things at play. Well, the 2 and 3 are connected because the apparent horizon is not the true horizon because of the precipitation. It's really that simple. There's nothing more that needs to be said here. You could also argue that perspective plays a role as well, because again, convergence, it's going to look like train tracks touch in the distance. That doesn't mean they actually touch. So you have all these factors. I mean, literally, how long did it take me to say that? A minute? 2 minutes? That's it. I mean, what else is there to discuss on this topic of boats disappearing over whatever? Looking like they bleed into the horizon from the bottom up.
Ergo, that building at 4 miles is missing the bottom brick. Doesn't mean it's obscured by Earth curve at 1.2 times the square root of the observer's height in feet, though. We can debunk that.
It's true,
but then
David.
bring in the blink test.
If you don't mind,
I'm going to keep this on mute, and feel free to talk while this is playing in the background, just for people watching, so that you have a different example here to talk about this. Go ahead, Patrick.
So what I want to point out is that you asked the question about looking out into the water and how a boat disappears from the bottom up. When you zoom in on that boat after it has disappeared from the bottom up, you can reacquire it in its entirety via telescope. Okay? If you're able to reacquire the bottom of the boat by telescopy, then it follows. Say again?
Have you done it?
Yes.
You can find countless videos of people doing
Not
just
videos.
this.
I meant like you've seen it.
Have I personally? Yes, I've watched others do it.
On video?
Yes, on video.
I'm just clear. I'm not trying to find I'm just literally asking. I'm just curious. That's all.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. The ability. So I just want to make sure this is very plain. You watch a vessel of some kind in the distance. Your eye perceives it to be disappearing bottom up.
And just another example of true horizon versus apparent horizon in the video that they're playing here. Because I haven't seen Whitehead. I mean, nobody here is addressing apparent horizon versus true horizon. What good are all these videos if you don't know where the horizon is? Because if you're, regardless of whether you're flat, it doesn't matter. You're engaged in an argument that something is either alleged to be going over the curvature of the Earth or alleged to be going farther than somebody can see it, whatever the case may be, or both on either flat or globe model. if you don't know where the horizon is, when you're making this argument on either side, then it's not a scientific argument either. It's not a scientific argument, is it? I mean, these are the basics. I got to give props to David Weiss here because he doesn't go on all these crazy, aggressive ramblings, like, regardless of how accurate, like Nathan Oakley here. He breaks it down simple, and he's relatively civil to the people that deserve it anyway. And again, he brings up all the examples, True Horizon versus Apparent Horizon. I mean, obviously, that's kind of obvious to anybody who understands mirages like Fata Morgana and all these things. I mean, I've seen this, I've looked at this stuff, not in regards to Flat Earth, but I always thought mirages were cool. So I've seen a lot of mirages on the ocean. I even remember reading stories about like flying ships, and one of the explanations, like from hundreds of years ago or whatever, one of the explanations was the ships weren't flying. It was just Fata Morgana. Just because of the conditions, it made the horizon look lower than it is. But it's just weird how people expect that things across vast distances are exactly how they look. Like, as if human eyes are infallible. As if Atmos conditions do not affect what you can see. As if fog doesn't exist. I mean, this really isn't rocket science. When there's a really bad fog, sometimes you can't even see a couple feet ahead. I mean, who's been caught in a bad fog? I mean, not just on the road. I mean, sure, that happens. But even just when there's been a horrible... You don't have to live in London. I mean, fogs happen all over. I remember some fogs just being out in the street, and you could barely see a few feet ahead of you. That doesn't mean the Earth is a globe. That doesn't mean it's a flat plane. That means there's a whole lot of moisture in the air, and it's blocking your view. Just like when you're looking at a pool, when you're in a pool, you're not going to be able to see across the whole pool with the same level of clarity as if you're not in a pool, and it's just clear air. Just like if it's a really dirty pool or like a really muddy pond or lake as opposed to a clear lake. The visibility is different depending on different conditions. What's the most mind-shocking to me is that I even had to say that. that to me is the most mind-shocking, because why is this even being discussed? That these are such basics.
Now, the thought of a globe earther is going to be the curvature of the Earth is beginning to obscure the bottom of that boat because it's curved and because the boat is going away. Now, the moment you use some kind of telescope or P900 camera to reacquire the boat in its entirety, you have disproven the notion that it was going over the curve in that instance. Does that make sense?
It makes sense, and I understand the claim. I'm incredulous to the point that has in fact been done.
Okay. When you have seen that it has been done over and over and over again, we'll talk about it after that. I would challenge.
And right here in the video, you see where the purported horizon is, where it looks like it is? That's actually not the real horizon. Now, I'm not claiming to know what the real horizon is. It's just when you look, I'm not sure if the horizon at great distances has it even ever been exactly, like 100% exactly where it appears to be. Just like how often have you looked in the great distance and seen train tracks not touch? Just a question. So depending on the conditions of that specific day, the true horizon could be way off the apparent horizon or kind of close. But I do not believe, and if I'm wrong, I'm wrong. People, everybody can feel free to correct me. Even the Dunning-Kruger goofs who hallucinate, they know things they don't know. But does the true and apparent horizon ever perfectly line up across extreme distances? I don't think it does, just because there's always going to be some kind of moisture or hydrogen or whatever. These gases are always in the air, unless we're all dead. But as long as precipitation exists, I don't believe that the true and apparent horizon can ever line up absolutely 100% perfect, the same way as whenever you look across the great distance, do train tracks ever not appear to touch? I don't believe that's the case. But anyway, continuing on here.
Challenge the audience, those of you who have not watched people with P900 cameras doing this over and over again. It's pretty intense stuff.
So this is the counter. Comes from Red's rhetoric. I'm sure you're familiar.
Again, that's not the counter, because it does not account for true horizon versus apparent horizon.
With him. And I do have another argument that he has posed to Flat Earth to throw at you guys. I'm just curious what you'll say. But this video was shot P900, clear day, and he's showing you the images put on top with the bottom missing over the distance, right? So this is what the blink test experiment is, and it's very effective at actually speaking to that claim. Okay.
Okay.
So I'm just wondering if I'm trying to think of like, because we're talking about a lot of things here, but what kind of practical experiments could like you, Patrick, me, Josh, say we go to, I guess they're putting together some of these awesome Badlands events that we're all going to actually physically meet each other. That should be great. I'm thinking, well, hey, if I make it down there in April, let's say whenever that is, and I was going to ask Josh, because I know Josh had a few experiment ideas as well, that we could do together. We could bring some flat earth proponents, yourselves, we could come, and together we could do a series of experiments. And that blink test would be one of them, as well as what Josh was saying with Denver. And then I do have a few others that have to do with the sun and some other things. But do you have a video, Patrick, to show what you're talking about?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I have tons of videos. I made them all in like little clips of Taboo Conspiracy and his wife taking enormous distance shots with the P900 camera, showing that the Earth is completely flat over distances with no curvature obscuring anything. People do it all the time. They also use telescoping lenses to reacquire things that have visually disappeared from the bottom up. I didn't like clip one of those.
That's okay. And you know what? Maybe we don't have to. I just want to give you the opportunity. I was just thinking this would be a good experiment that we could do in real reality together.
Can I address that?
We could verify, because we're just talking. I want to see it with my own eyes, because isn't that what this is?
Please,
observing
please,
yourself,
I beg of you. Can I address that? So a couple of things. The red rhetoric thing. So in Earth curve maths, which is where the assertion comes from that the horizon's blocking the view of the buildings, there's no account for angular descriptions in that maths. So
I'd be curious what he would say to you on that.
Again?
I said I would be curious to see what Red would say to you on that.
Okay.
Go ahead and continue.
It's not really about Red's opinion. It's more about the way it works. I mean, if again,
it's just
two things I want to address. There's just a couple of things I want to address. So the first is the Red rhetoric thing, but then I do want to cover this experiment idea. Great idea, but I do want to get to that more importantly. But the Red rhetoric thing, if you're looking at the building from the base of the building, you appreciate that you've got a very wide angle to the building. You'd have to literally arc the camera up. And as you back away from the building, you'll arc your camera down again. In other words, there's an angular relationship that's going on here. But in the assertions that the horizon's blocking the bottom of the building, it's not accounting for angles. It's not accounting for angular size. It's not accounting for
but those experiments do account for those angles. That's the thing. In those videos, and they show you exactly how it's done, they absolutely do account for those angles.
Can you show me that in Walter Bislin's maths, please?
I'm not talking about Walter Bisling. I'm talking about Red's rhetoric and his videos and his experiments.
I've had plenty of interactions.
He takes the P900.
I've had plenty of interactions with Red rhetoric as well.
I know, I've heard them.
Red rhetoric's maths is the same as Walter Bislin's. It's, as I said earlier, the globe Earth maths. There's not more than one. That's it. They're all using the same maths. Okay. So there is no account for angular anything in globe Earth maths. None. Okay? It's a 10-foot wall at any distance.
I don't think that Red would agree with you on that, and it's his experiment, so I'd be curious. And that's why I want us to do it. If we do it, instead of talking about other people's experiments.
That was the first thing. Okay, we can just defer to Red. Okay, there was two things, though. That was the first. So Red...
Get to the second, then.
Yeah, the second was knowing what science is. So, you're under the misapprehension. Please don't get triggered in the middle of what I'm telling you. That this is an experiment. But it isn't. Now, the way we've been hoodwinked into believing that we're on a sphere is by people telling you that they've got experiments or science or theories. I beg your indulgence to just let me say this. Thank you. So that magic trick has been planted into you from a very early age, about 5th grade, where they taught you what the scientific method actually was and how the method offers empiricism through the method described to you in the, whatever you want to call it, the pre-show, i.e. if A, then B, or if A, not B, alternative and null hypothesis validated by experiment to give you an empirical outcome. Only one can be true. So therefore science, and in this case experiment, offers an empirical outcome. So when you hear the word experiment in this case referenced incorrectly to a blink test, the audience will hear empirical, because that's what they've been trained from a very early age. However, an experiment is to establish the cause of a naturally occurring phenomena through systematic experimentation based on a valid hypothesis. Now, this doesn't have that. There is no naturally occurring phenomena here to study. Nothing's occurring in nature. You're talking about a comparison with a varying angle from two different lens positions. That's not a naturally occurring phenomena to science. This is outside the purview of science. But understanding what science actually is the key to understanding how you've been deceived into believing that you're on a model.
Yeah, that's a very interesting monologue there. So I'm going to unpack this in mind shock fashion. So, okay. I believe that is a fallacy. That's a non-congruent argument because Nathan Oakley is presupposing there's only one very, very clearly defined definition of science. Now, to the degree of the definition, he's correct. There's, it's not like you can make a more generalized definition encompassing things that don't have dependent and independent variables and controls. However, the definition of science, the word science, whatever, translated from older words, the definition is not 100% clear like that. It's a methodology.
Called a sphere that was derived from flat Earth elevation angle measurements to Polaris to give you latitude. Understanding
So I shouldn't
science
trust
is the
my
key.
own eyes, Nathan. Are you telling me this?
Sorry?
Should I not trust my own eyes?
What do you mean, trust your own eyes?
Should I trust my eyes?
I don't know what you mean.
So again, if we use a very generic definition like science is a systemic endeavor that builds and organizes knowledge in the form of testable explanations and predictions about the universe, or conversely from Oxford, the systematic study of the structure and behavior of the physical and natural world through observation, experimentation, and the testing of theories against the evidence obtained. And again, this should be done in accordance with the scientific method. It's not like you can't do that for observing a building. Because if you want to test the way human eyes work, so we're going to get into really crazy land now. If you want to believe this is all some computer program or some kind of holographic reality, that's one thing. If you want to say that humans were genetically engineered and were not actually natural, that's another thing. But human vision, the way human vision works, one could say that is natural. It's in the realm of biology, and it is natural, biology and optics. So you can make scientific experiments based on what you would and wouldn't see. We could even take the shape of the Earth out of this. Just based, like in a fog. You can make experiments. Like you could have a hypothesis that because, you're out in a fog, you can't see things. You make those observations, foggy day versus non-foggy day. And then you're basically hypothesizing if there's more precipitation, there's less visibility. Because on a cloudy, rainy day, can you really see, what about an all-out monsoon? Can you really see farther in an all-out monsoon than on a perfectly clear day with not a cloud in the sky? So you can make your hypothesis, and you can make and you can conduct these experiments in accordance with the scientific method, of course, controlling for variables, of course, all of these things. And so you can make scientific experiments about things that are not necessarily natural. Like you can use a building in the distance to make this experiment on whether or not precipitation affects visibility. That would still be scientific. It doesn't have to be 100% in the natural world. And this is a false dichotomy and non-congruent argument by Nathan Oakley. And I think he did it. I think he did it intentionally, too. The guy's obviously enjoying his trolling, even while he's also spewing very accurate information. It's not necessarily non-fallacious because of the things I just outlined.
It's a simple
Yes,
question.
you should trust your own eyes, which show you, obviously, that you can see further than you'd be able to see on a sphere.
But I disagree because that's not what I'm seeing.
What are you seeing?
Where?
We're looking for evidence.
I'm
evidence.
telling you. I'm seeing things disappear bottom up. And I'm seeing that there's an issue with the...
He should have asked David Whitehead if train tracks touch in the distance. Can you trust your eyes? Do train tracks touch in the distance? Because this is a logical fallacy on Whitehead's part. I mean, this is actually a stack of fallacies, including false dichotomies and hasty generalizations. I mean, yes, because he's trying to link it to empiricism, what you can act, seeing is believing. Of course, a better saying is believe none of what you hear and only half of what you see. But anyway, this is Whitehead's misunderstanding, but Whitehead's trying to link it to empiricism, which, I mean, it's not that simple, of course. And this is why the false cause logical fallacy and the scientific method, identifying variables and controls, is so important. Yes, that is what you are seeing, Whitehead. But it's not for the reason you think it is, even if the Earth is a globe. This is what makes the whole thing so funny. Because even if the Earth is a globe, that's not the reason why you're seeing what you're seeing, Mr. Whitehead.
The understanding of how that visual effect works with the human eye related to reality, right? So I'm just, the reason I'm asking this question is because this is a sticking point in the flat Earth debate is, can we trust our eyes and our senses? And is it okay to employ different tools that can see farther, that can, measure farther? Or should we only rely on our eyes and our senses only?
I don't really understand the question 100%, but I'd like to address one thing that you mentioned, and I've said it already, and I apologize for saying it again. But the fact is that when you look at an object disappearing to your eye from the bottom up, and then are able to use instrumentation to reacquire it entirely,
so we can use. Okay, that's the answer.
Yes,
that's the answer. We can use instrumentation. Great.
May I?
Yeah, go ahead.
When you reacquire it using instrumentation, it is important to acknowledge that you have falsified the notion that it was disappearing over the curve of a presupposed spherical Earth. I'd like you to just agree to that, because that's the kind of thing that we're going to be testing.
So you're saying that if we go and we find the right thing to view, right?
Telescope's fine.
If we do a telescope or a P900 or whatever your favorite camera would be, right? Mm-hmm. If we see something going over the horizon and then you can bring it back by zooming in, you're saying that's the proof, right?
I'm having trouble with this because Whitehead said that he's been obsessed. Is that the word he used? Obsessed or interested in flat Earth debate for years? And he hasn't seen what is probably the number one proof brought up countless times on countless debates and almost every single generic flat Earth video on the topic. I mean, I'm going to have to appeal to incredulity here myself. I'm committing a logical fallacy. I'm appealing to incredulity. This seems off. This is going to tip me into believing David Whitehead is some kind of a shill. But on the other hand, does it really look like he's playing stupid? I don't think so. So this is just very puzzling to me. I mean, how is it possible that he's watched all these countless debates for countless hours over all these years that flat Earth has been all over the internet? Whatever, 7 years or more that it's been extremely, I mean, obviously more, but that it's been really, really popular for at least 7 years now. I mean, this is insane. I'm appealing to incredulity. How does David Whitehead not know what is probably the number one most cited piece of evidence by flat Earth? I don't know what to make of this whole debate. I mean, I'm really, this one's unique, I have to say.
That would be the experiment we're testing?
I'm going to repeat what I said, and then you'll tell me because that's not what I said. I said that falsifies the supposition that it was disappearing bottom up due to going over a presupposed spherical Earth.
Right.
Well, it depends on the size, though. He could have made that a little bit more specific on what is the mainstream scientism position on the presupposed sphere.
Okay. Yeah, no, that's what I meant. Yeah, exactly. Okay. So that would be the experiment we could do. That could be one of the experiments we do. And we could get one of these bad boys.
It'd be more appropriate to call it a demonstration.
Sure. Demonstration, whatever word you want, right? This is the baby that I'm going to be picking up.
Experiment is very specific.
Okay. Yeah. Celestron Next Gen 6SE telescope. I'm getting it because it's one of the cheaper ones, actually. And I'm going to be planning on making observations of celestial objects, but you can also use this along with multiple cameras, and you can get different kinds of cameras just to sort of like include every possible viewing angle that we could imagine. And then we could try to make observations like that. right?
Absolutely. Hell yeah.
Okay,
Absolutely. That would be great fun. Another thing, and so that's the curvature stuff, and that's the only claim we got to today. The heliocentric model makes a bunch more claims that are evidence free.
Can I run one by you real quick, Patrick? And
Yeah,
Nathan,
sure.
feel free to jump in as you're going to do anyways, which is fine. Another experiment we could do is by bringing in the sun. Okay, so this is a personal observation that I've made many times. And my question would be, if the Earth is flat,
This is actually relatively palatable with Josh not talking.
how could we have complete darkness on one half of the planet and light on the other half of the planet if the sun would be required to move away from us as opposed to circumnavigating us or going around us, right? On the model. So I just want to ask, this is the question, and then go ahead. Does the angular size of the sun change throughout the day?
Okay. Now, it's very important to note that I'm not claiming any of these. I'm not making claims about this, but one can observe on a very, very clear day the sun getting smaller and smaller in deserts. Now, in
We lose Patrick?
Okay,
in
so-
moisture-rich,
we've managed to lose Patrick somehow. But your question is, why does the angular
Patrick, you're
size of
back.
the sun?
Oh, sorry.
not-
Hold on, Nathan. I just want to make sure he's back, and then feel free. Okay, Patrick, are you back? Can you hear me? I just noticed his connection
Looked like he's
dropped a little
frozen.
bit.
Yeah, it looks like he's frozen.
Okay, let's let him fix that. Nathan, take it away.
So you're saying, why does the apparent size of the sun not change throughout the day? Correct.
No, I was actually asking the question, does the sun change in angular size throughout the day? That was my question. And Patrick's back, so maybe Patrick finish and then Nathan go ahead.
let me just finish real quick. But the statement, how is it that half the Earth has total darkness? That's not actually true. There are times when the Earth has way more visibility of the sun than the globe model would ever allow. But so the notion that it has to be a ball because there's exactly half of the Earth that doesn't have any sun at all given times, it's just falsifiable. It's not true. In fact, there are some days when they say that the Earth is seeing 99% of all human beings are seeing the sun all at the same time. You can look that stuff up. It's very interesting. But no, the globe model does not explain the percentage of the Earth that is looking at the sun.
Okay, so then the next question is, does the angular size of the sun in the flat Earth model have to change throughout the day?
What
Because
flat
it's
Earth model would that
moving
be?
away from us and towards us, right? It's moving
Let
on
Nathan
the
take that.
record player, right?
What flat Earth model would that be? I haven't claimed any flat Earth model. That's the first thing. And secondly,
Well, there is no flat Earth model, first of all, but I'm just curious what you think about the sun. How do we resolve the issue with the sun?
when you say there is no flat Earth model, that's not true. They're all flat Earth models.
Can
All
we
of the
make
maps-
predictions on it? Do we have an actual scientific model where you can make predictions and you
What's-
can do those equations and have repeatable experiments? Do you have that model in place? Do you have, any footage of the edge of the Earth? Like, this is what I mean. Like,
Wow. I'm really disappointed in Whitehead, I have to say. He still, other than that little tirade where he was telling Nathan Oakley to shut up, other than that, and this guy is like a lifelong martial artist supposedly, so that was actually kind of surprising that he got that triggered. But other than that moment, he doesn't seem, and he was triggered because of the interrupting, not because of what's being discussed. So we do have to give Whitehead credit here. He is probably, he's slightly more triggered than the jet fighter pilot on the Sartain podcast. But, not much. He's pretty good. He's not triggered. But I have to say I'm really disappointed because, see, if he had never heard of Flat Earth, I wouldn't be as disappointed because then this is all fine. He's claiming, and I actually believe him because, again, he was on the Unslaved podcast for however long. He's into esotericism. He understands all of these conspiracies and secret societies. He's not a clueless goof. He's supposedly for human freedom, etc., etc. He's not a authority-worshipping cultist bootlicker. At least not in all these other subjects. Here, I don't understand what's going on if we are to believe that he's looked into Flat Earth for this, because all of these fallacious questions Like, who said there's, first of all, who said there's an edge? Second of all, even if there is an edge, who said you'd actually be able to get there in order to take those photographs or video? Or furthermore, if he understood the basic, most popular flat Earth model, which includes Antarctica, again, the Antarctic base, like the whole Earth, whatever, what we know of the Earth, what we consider the Earth would be the Antarctic basin, and therefore Antarctica, the highest landmass on Earth, would be encircling the Earth, and of course there's countless hours of footage of the Antarctic ice shelves, etc., etc. Now, I'm not making the claim that that's the edge of the Earth, but why would there be an edge? I mean, all of these basic questions. Is anybody buying that Whitehead actually did look into these things? Because if these questions were coming from Josh, it would make sense. Because then it doesn't matter if he's studied this for 20 years. I mean, the mental capacity's not there. But with Whitehead, this is actually surprising me.
We don't have an actual model. This is admitted by Jeranism and all the many of the flat earthers. They say, yeah, we don't have a model. We just have our counter evidence to your evidence. Do you agree
I
with
was in
that,
the
or do
middle
you
of
have a
saying something
model to
opposite to
present?
that, but I got stepped all over. I'll try again to contradict what you've just said. Other people say that aren't me. All of them are flat
No, I'm
Earth
asking you.
models. That's the second attempt. I'll count them off. All of the models, including your globe model, are flat Earth models.
See, that's not true. I mean, I understand why Oakley is saying that because he's using one very strict definition. But again, it's not that different. It's not like there's completely different definitions. There's shades of definition. As long as they align with the principle, they're still valid definitions, right? I mean, this just doesn't go for scientific definitions. This is for all definitions. Like a book. Is a comic book a book? Yes, it's a type of book, even though it has illustrations. Is a book without illustrations a book? Yes. Is a holy text like the Bible a book? Yes. Is a picture book with only pictures a book? Yes. It all falls under the umbrella of the book, the concept of a book. So same thing in science. Yes, you have a principle. If a definition violates the main principle, the core principle, then it's not a valid definition. But if it doesn't violate the principle, it could be included in different shades of meaning. But let's go to just Britannica, scientific modeling. The generation of physical, conceptual, or mathematical representation of a real phenomena that is difficult to observe directly. Now, regardless of whether the Earth is flat or a globe, we can, like, nobody's arguing that the Earth is so small that it's, less than the size of a few miles. I believe everybody is, not everybody, but I believe everybody at least knows somebody who's traveled more than a few miles from wherever they live, if they haven't themselves. So the world is a big place regardless of whether it's flat or a sphere. So you would need some kind of a model to have a concept of what the whole thing is, regardless of what shape it is. Even if it's a holographic projection, you would still need to model it somehow if you're trying to explain the whole thing or get an idea of the whole thing. Scientific models are used to explain and predict the behavior of real objects or systems and are used in a variety of scientific disciplines, ranging from physics and chemistry to ecology and the earth sciences. Although modeling is a central component of modern science, scientific models at best are approximations of the objects and systems that they represent. They are not exact replicas. Thus, scientists constantly are working to improve and refine models. Okay, so there are many different flat earth models. Many different ones. I really don't know why David Whitehead singled out, with a few anecdotal examples of Jeranism or whoever that are saying that they don't have a model. There's many flat earthers claiming a model. And there's a whole bunch of different models, with and without domes, various sizes, whatever. With the globe Earth, I don't know if there's that many different models. There might be, but, there's one main model, I guess. In scientism, the current globe, Earth, oblate, spheroid model, whatever. That's the current main one. I believe most people that are globe earthers would say that's the true model. But yeah, so Nathan Oakley stating that they're all flat models, I mean, he's not being intellectually honest there because, or it needs a further explanation. If he wants to state that even the globe model was based in certain concepts on a flat model. I mean, that's true. He's actually gone over with some of the history with the sextant and astronomy. Obviously, all the ancients had flat Earth cosmologies. As far as what has been the evidence presented, if somebody wants to introduce new evidence, that's perfectly fine. Then I will restate that once new evidence has been presented. But as far as known information, even establishment information, they had flat Earth models. So to say that those were warped, turned into a globe model, to call the globe model a flat Earth model just because of the history of how it was created, that does not mean that the globe Earth model is not a model, is only a flat Earth model. It's clearly not. So major minus here on Nathan Oakley. But yeah, so to all the people that are saying that Nathan Oakley is like the best flat Earth debater and the smartest, etc., I would say he's not even really that close to Austin Whitsitt either in any category. But, you know, I know that's probably going to trigger a lot of people, but whatever. Let's continue.
All of them are using the latitude lines that are derived by way of a measurement. That's an, in reality, measurement.
That doesn't make the globe Earth model not a model.
Of Polaris on a flat plane. Those angle measurements to Polaris and the degree that it drops towards the horizon as you move away from it give you the latitude lines. That's flat Earth elevation angle measurements to derive the concept that is used to give you your globe model. Now, models aren't science. Science deals exclusively with phenomenon. That's things happening, flat Earth or globe Earth for that matter.
That's not correct. Technology is also scientific. He's kind of pretending that this one strict definition is the only definition and that science cannot deal with non-phenomena.
That's a concrete noun, outside the purview of science. You keep appealing to this like it's science. It is not. Meanwhile, we've debunked the mathematical assertion that the horizon is at a geometric limitation to boats and buildings by showing that it isn't. Debunking the geometry. You don't need to trust anything. The maths is laid down, set in
That's why we're going to
stone.
do the experiments. He didn't really debunk it. You had an answer. There's answers to your answers. We can go on forever. Let's do the experiment together and just prove it once and for all.
What's
I'm
the
asking about
experiment?
the sun, Nathan.
What's an experiment?
Does the sun change
Okay, what's
in
an
angular
experiment?
size throughout the day on a flat Earth or not?
The not actual size of the sun. You're asking me why does the not actual size of the sun, that's angular size,
Does
not
the sun
change?
get bigger and smaller throughout the day based on where it's located and where you're viewing it?
And that's angular size, not actual size.
That's what I said, the angular size. Yeah. Does that change?
The not actual size change?
Does the sun change in size?
In not actual size, angular size.
Does the sun
What do you mean
appear
by
to
that?
get smaller?
Or angular, not actual size. That's the third time I've said it.
Right, because of your it's not like we're saying the sun is growing and shrinking like as an actual object. I'm not saying that. Let me rephrase it. From my perspective, viewing the sun, if I were to track it throughout the day, and obviously I would never stare directly at the sun, never do that. Let's say I got a really nice camera with a decent zoom on it.
Whoa. Whitehead is not about sun gazing either? I thought he knew about all these, the ancients and all of this occult knowledge. I mean, this is weird. I mean, I'm going to have to introduce a new theory that the original David Whitehead was replaced by some kind of Illuminati clone and now he's a shill.
And I put a solar filter on front of that camera, and I literally just mount it on an equatorial mount that would actually track the sun throughout the day. And I let it run for, say, a few days in a row. Will I see the actual size of that sun change based on perspective? Because it would have to be moving forwards and backwards, because what's a sunset otherwise, right? This is the argument that you guys will bring if I say, I've watched the sun go below the horizon. I see it multiple times, and I've seen it come up from the horizon until it's a full sphere in the sky. So in the flat Earth explanation, it would have to go away from you, right? Similar to the boats on the horizon. That's the only way it would work on a flat surface. So if that's true, then we would see an observable difference in the angular size of the sun relative to the observer.
The not
Okay, I'd
actual
like to-
size.
Nathan, I'd like to answer this.
Well, he's put it to me. No, that is what the sun does as it goes away from you. Do you know how I know?
So it gets smaller.
My
to
bad,
me.
only
To
one
me, it gets
sentence.
smaller.
Only about 2 or 3 minutes from you. One sentence from me. Maybe you call me a dick. I'll try again. In celestial navigation, you measure your position to the horizon. Now, if the sun is above the horizon, its GP location, that's the point below the sun on the ground, i.e. if the sun was above you at your zenith, can be, and often is, beyond the horizon. So when you measure your angle to the horizon and the GP location of the star, it's beyond the limitation of your view at the horizon. So when you say it's going over the horizon, you mean over the physical geometric limitation to your view at 1.22 times the square root of the observer's height in feet, aka Earth curve hill getting in the way, that we debunked? Definitely not. Meanwhile, in celestial navigation, you can measure its position beyond the horizon after you establish the ground as level to get an angle to the sun to find out where your location is. That's called celestial navigation. It only works on a flat plane. It only works with angle measurements from Polaris, that's your latitude lines, that were measured from a flat plane. That's why all the maps are flat. So, no, the sun doesn't go beyond the horizon.
So, Nathan, give me a straight answer. Does the size of the sun on my perspective change? And why do I see, as the sun is going over the horizon, I don't see the whole sun disappear. I see it like a quarter of a sun, then half a sun, then three, like it's dipping down. I'm seeing.
Why do the train tracks appear to touch in the distance? Can David Whitehead answer that question? This is one of the most painful debates I've actually ever went through, just because, Oakley's being so freaking obnoxious. And also committing a fair amount of fallacies. For the Oakley bootlickers, this guy has not impressed me with the fallacies. He's pretty impressive with his recitation of certain math and knowledge regarding a lot of this stuff, but not with fallacies.
It disappeared downwards, and then I'm watching the same phenomenon in the morning right from my deck, and it's coming up, and you see the top, and then a little bit more, and then a little bit more, and then a little bit more, then it's in the sky, right? That's what I'm witnessing. And so if you're saying that the reason the sun is setting and rising is because it's vanishing from my field of vision.
I didn't make this claim.
Then I would see the whole thing shrink into the smallest little dot like a pinhead.
Would you?
And then I couldn't see it anymore. I would not see the shape obscured by the horizon. I wouldn't see that.
Like a brick that disappears at 4 miles.
We're not talking about bricks. I'm talking about the sun.
Well, no, we're talking about things that you said get blocked by the horizon. There's a physical geometric limitation at 1.22 times the square root of the observer's height in feet. That's an Earth curve hill getting in the way that the sun's going behind in this description.
No joke.
My bad, I'm just summarising his position. Haven't actually refuted it yet. Of course, that's the first time.
Refute it. Why do I see that? Explain it.
I was in the middle of summarising your position to refute it, but then somebody's talked, and now you're asking me to do it again. Just another interruption. Yeah, if the horizon was Earth curve, it would be at 1.22 times the square root of the observer's height in feet. A hill, geometric in limitations, to get in the way of the sun. We've debunked that. The horizon's not Earth curve. We can show it beyond the geometric limitations.
We have to do
there's
that
the third interruption.
Together.
We can show it beyond the geometric limitations, and further to that, you can measure the GP position of the sun beyond the horizon, where you see it, when you navigate with it. It could be up to 2,000 or 3,000 miles away from you if it's low to the horizon, based on the angular measurement.
It's weird. Again, the Oakley fanboys might get really pissed at me, but we're being objective here. Oakley doesn't even understand what a false dichotomy is. He keeps saying it can only work this way, as if he has all the knowledge in the universe. Even if everything that Nathan Oakley said is correct, all of the knowledge of all humans put together would still be what? Close to zero of all available knowledge? Or are people thinking that now, magically in 2023, all of a sudden, humans have or Nathan Oakley has all the knowledge in the universe, so he can logically state that it can only be this, excluding all other possibilities, as of yet untheorized possibilities. We don't even know what those are, but it can't be them according to Oakley. This guy's pretty goofy. I understand why people like him, just because of he does have a lot of knowledge. His math seems pretty solid. But again, even basic fallacies, like he threw his little temper tantrum in the Mind Shock chat, not understanding what an ad hom was, and he just, again, the obnoxiousness, the lack of understanding on some of these basic fallacies. He might actually have a good understanding of even some of the more advanced fallacies. I'm not knocking that. I've seen bits and pieces. He has some of the advanced fallacies down pretty well too, but he keeps falling for this false dichotomy this entire time.
Off a flat plane, minus from 60, minus from 90 and times by 60 to give you the distance to the GP to navigate with it. Well, that distance is along a flat baseline. It's a triangle. Well, that's the sun already beyond the horizon in navigational terms. So when you say it goes beyond a hill, no, it's long beyond the hill when you measure its GP position on a flat plane. That's the second time I've refuted your position.
That's not a refutation. So my eyes are deceiving me?
No,
Patrick, give it a
navigation.
shot.
No, navigation is showing you that it's already beyond the horizon when it's several thousand miles away from you and you're using it with an angle measurement to it. Third time.
All right, so let me take a crack at this. So what I don't really understand here is we started by saying there is no evidence that the curve of the Earth is of a presupposed spherical Earth is the reason why we have a horizon. And we ended up kind of battling to a standstill with us saying, do you have evidence of such? To which you responded, okay, we're going to do an experiment to get evidence of such. And then you say to me,
because you didn't like the experiment I showed you. And so I said, let's do it ourselves then.
Right.
Can you define experiment for us?
I just
You haven't shown anything.
I was 10 seconds into my answer, Dave.
Go ahead, Patrick.
I mean, Nathan gets mad for a reason. Okay, so I'm gonna try again. All right. So the fact is that we said repeatedly that we can show that the Earth is not a ball because the horizon can be shown not to be Earth curve, because we're able to reacquire objects that were previously thought to be beyond the horizon, blocked by a physical barrier, not simply too small to see because of perspective, blocked by the physical curvature of the Earth. This is the claim of the Globers, okay? Now, you then come back to me and say, well, we're going to find some other experiment. That's fine, whatever. But the fact is that I have already shown you why it is possible to show that the curvature of the Earth is not the reason for the horizon and that such curvature cannot be shown to exist. And then in response, you've come to me and you've said, okay, so we're going to go over to your model that I don't claim, and we're going to say, I want you to explain to me why the sun does this. And you can come up with a laundry list of observable phenomena that you think are explained by the globe model, which we have effectively just debunked. But just because it makes predictions in your mind does not mean that it is true, that it is the reality that we are standing on.
Bam, laying down the law here. I mean, that's pretty good phrasing that I think. I mean, I don't know if Josh will understand that, but that's pretty good phrasing. I mean, I hope that Whitehead can understand that. Not just that, but I don't know why they're not bringing up the prediction. Like, I bring this up in just about every single analysis where someone is claiming that a prediction equals reality. Look at the ancients and all their perfect predictions of eclipses and solstices. I mean, they allegedly, or somebody, built these pyramids that on solstices make shadows of snakes. I mean, look at the predictive power of these civilizations with flat Earth cosmology. Does that mean the Earth is flat? I would never use that as a claim. I'm not claiming any shade, but if I were arguing for flat Earth, I would never use that. Just like if I was arguing for globe Earth, why would you use a prediction? Just like if you're pretending to be a psychic and you're really good at guessing, that doesn't mean you have psychic powers. Now, maybe you do, but it doesn't mean you do. The predictions themselves do not mean you do. Again, not rocket science, but for whatever reason, it's just so lost on a lot of people.
That is called an affirming the consequent fallacy. If the Earth is a globe, then we would see the sun go down under the horizon. The sun seems to go down under the horizon, therefore the Earth is a globe. Affirming the consequent fallacy. If A, then B, B, therefore A. It's a fallacy. You can get ChatGPT to admit to it over and over again. So when you ask me to explain to you why the sun appears to do what it does, it's just not part of my burden. We've already shown that the horizon is not Earth curve. Therefore, the Earth is not a ball of 3959 miles in radius. I'm done.
Okay, can I respond real quick? And then Josh, I'd like you to chime in on this.
No problem. Just been listening.
Why would anybody want Josh to chime in on anything? I mean, is he like a family friend where they're just indulging him to with participation trophy? I mean, what's going on with Josh? Again, I don't want to attack this guy. This guy's clearly got a severe mental disability. Why would anyone want him to chime in on any kind of serious discussion on anything? I don't get it. I don't get it.
So, yeah. So if I'm looking at your model, there has to be certain things that happen if that model is to be true. And the whole point of looking at it is to say, I see a contradiction with what you're saying over here. So we got most of this debate was taken up with the curvature thing, which is great. I'm glad. And everybody can figure it out. And we should do those experiments without watching videos. I agree. Right. But if I say, all right, how do you answer this contradiction? I want to know, because if that is if the phenomena of the sun isn't explained, then that's a problem for flat Earth. And I want to know, how do you get around that? And what's the evidence that you have to refute that?
So what claim have we made about the sun exactly for us to be defending?
I made the claim. I asked the question. I said, okay, because actually, this is a really good, we didn't actually get your claim. How close is the sun and how does it operate on a flat Earth?
Okay, so you can't acquire that information because if you're using the sun to navigate with, as it moves towards the horizon, if you're measuring an angle and then calculating the distance to the GP beyond the horizon that isn't Earth curve that we've debunked, then that would infer, if you're using the triangle to get the height, that it's moving lower to the ground as it reaches the horizon. Well, obviously that's not the case. The sun isn't getting closer to the ground. You can derive its GP position to navigate with it, but it's not getting closer to the ground. So we don't have a height claim. I don't make a height claim. Meanwhile, Kepler's third law of interplanetary motion would suggest that you have orbits. And those orbits can be used to give you scaling values for a sphere Earth in a sky vacuum with gas not expanding into it, and the sun being at a 93 million mile distance because a guy called Christian Huygens superimposed the R value we debunked, measured by Al-Biruni at a geometric limitation at 1.2 times the square root of the observer's height in feet, onto Venus. So Christian Huygens assumes that Venus has the same R value because obviously it's a rock in a sky vacuum in an orbital motion that Kepler assumed. And therefore you can give your scaling values to your R assumptions to give you your distance and size of the sun, all of which we can debunk. So we don't have a size and distance claim for the sun. You do. This is a burden of proof reversal fallacy. You're the one with the positive claim of size and distance for the sun, and asking me why it does a not actual size change as it moves through its not actual position in a refracted, non-geometric Earth curve world is irrelevant because I don't have a claim about it. You have one about a distance and size to your sun in a heliocentric model.
So that was probably Oakley's best moment thus far here. Non-triggered, just normally, in a normal volume, calmly, succinctly, without being a high schooler thrown around an elementary school kid. I mean, that was a highlight right there. I mean, that might have been Oakley's finest moment I've ever seen. Because he's just very succinctly going over the history, because a lot of these people involved in these debates, like clearly Whitehead and obviously Josh, they don't know the history of any of this alleged science. Obviously, it's just scientism. They don't know the history of any of this stuff. Now, obviously, it doesn't necessarily have anything to do with the shape of the Earth, but the history of how all of these claims were made and just the basics of fallacy. Like, he actually, look, this is kind of weird. Oakley is showing that he's capable of talking like a normal human being in a civil fashion, and he actually described the fallacies and why they're fallacies pretty well. He could have done even better, obviously. He could have I think one of the issues here between Patrick and obviously Nathan, they're assuming, especially for Josh, they're assuming he's like at least at like a 3-year-old mental function. And then they're getting frustrated when he's not I mean, clearly he's not even at a 3-year-old mental functioning level. So you can't expect him to understand anything. Even with David Whitehead, I don't know what process level I would give him. I mean, I would say at least high school. I mean, maybe high school, middle school, high school. That's pretty good. I mean, that's enough to understand all these things. If Nathan Oakley should have probably went even a little bit simpler, but that was really good. I have to give him props there. That was the finest Nathan Oakley moment I've ever seen.
And given that I've just told you about all the assumptions of an R value imposed by Christian Huygens on Venus with an application of Kepler's third law, how do you justify your distance to your sun?
I'm just talking about observation, man. That's what I want to know. How does it work on a flat Earth? If the Earth is flat,
This is sad because it looks like. So here's the thing. I don't think David Whitehead's triggered. I really don't. I mean, look at him. He's talking calmly. I just don't think he comprehended anything that Nathan just said. And Nathan actually finally civilly and slowly and clearly explained it for once in this entire debate. So Whitehead has no excuse here. I really don't know what to make of. My new theory is that he's been replaced with some kind of an Illuminati clone, because this is not what I would have expected from the David Whitehead on the Unslaved podcast.
and I disagree with Patrick's assumption that there's somehow not the phenomena of half the Earth being lit and half the Earth not. I've got friends that live in Australia. We can experiment all the time and go put cameras out our windows and observe how pitch black that it gets in one area without any kind of faint light going on that you would expect if the sun is going away. You have pitch black and you have full daylight.
Yeah, this is getting tough. I still appreciate the fact that Whitehead is not triggered, but he never heard of sunsets or sunrises. He thinks it's just I mean, what is he saying here? And just because you have 2 points on a gigantic Earth, regardless of the shape, that doesn't prove exactly 50% of it is light or dark completely. And that doesn't mean that sunset or sunrise is not going on over large distances either, which it clearly is. Yeah, I'm really disappointed in Whitehead. I mean, really, like, this is rough.
On the other side, right? So if the flat Earth model is to actually work, the contradiction I'm pointing out is that the sun would have to change angular size throughout the day, and what we observe, what I have observed,
False dichotomy again. I mean, yeah, I don't know what to make of Whitehead here. Because, I don't think he's mentally disabled. I mean, we have a clear mental disabled individual here in Josh. So, we can compare. Whitehead seems to have a decent level of mental capacity. He's just not utilizing it. That's what it seems like. But he doesn't appear to be triggered either. So what's his excuse? I can't come up with one.
it doesn't change angular size, not even one little bit. And anytime we see change in the size, we can ascribe that to glare and the way light operates with the human eye and everything else.
Man, Whitehead is spiraling. It never changes angular size, except when it does. It never appears to, except all the times that it does, and then he roped in. He's immediately spamming the ad hoc logical fallacy and false cause logical fallacy. Also, you can include that in there, where he's saying it never changes angular size, except when it does, and then it's because of all these other reasons, therefore it can never actually change size. So he just made his argument unfalsifiable, which he psychologically projected on the flat earthers. But he's a lot more than double as goofy, because he's claiming it never appears to change angular size based on observations. But when it does, even though he said it doesn't, but when it does, it's for all these other reasons. And it can never be for the reason that it's actually moving farther away. So he knows it's not that. So we can come up with all these mental gymnastics to come up with all these things to explain it away in order to maintain the faith. I mean, Whitehead has really lost a fan here. Because, I mean, he's sunk to this level of goofery. And then pretending and hallucinating that with filters it doesn't appear to change size. It clearly does. Now, that doesn't mean anything. I'm not going to be goofy and hallucinate and pretend it means it must be going away. But clearly it appears to. And again, has David Whitehead ever looked at train tracks in the distance? I mean, he's got this weird obsession with things must be the way they look like. I mean, it's just really weird.
But if you take those solar filtered camera lenses and you track it, and
got it the second time. I got it the first time.
You're interrupting.
I got it the first time. I'm not deaf.
I'm just about to finish.
Let him finish what? Repeating it.
4,
I heard it the first time.
5. That's 6 times you
It
interrupted.
doesn't matter what I'm saying.
Go ahead and finish.
Shut up.
Second time I've heard it.
Finish, and then
I
you
heard it
can
the first time.
So I'm going to mute him.
Right, but we are talking to an audience as well.
Yeah, we're not.
So
exactly.
we're trying.
I'm going to get muted because I've already addressed it, and he's rinsed and repeated and gone through the motions of saying the exact same thing again. And because he doesn't like me giving the same objection to the same repetition of the same thing, I get muted. So when I'm asked why I have my own show, for my own audience that can hear me speaking because I'm not in control of my own show, yeah, I can still talk to you as an audience and say, what a wanker. You don't like me objecting to you repeating the same thing I've already overcome? You haven't acknowledged my refutation of it.
See here, this is why people don't like Nathan Oakley. I mean, just the obnoxious nature of it. I mean, you do have to just pause for a moment, like you're on a platform with other people, as long as they're being civil. See, again, this would be Nathan Oakley is perfectly appropriate in doing all of this when he's on with goofs like McToon or goofs like so-called Professor Dave. That's perfectly fine because they're asking for it. But these guys are actually being civil and they're genuinely not able to comprehend. I mean, let them talk for an extra 30 seconds. I mean, just keep it civil.
Just going to be completely ignored? Yeah, that's all right. Stick me on mute. That's why I've got my own show. So that I don't get muted by a host when I object to hearing the same thing repeated without a single acknowledgement of my refutation of it.
It would change angular size throughout the day to the observer if it was a close sun going over a flat Earth. It would, if it doesn't, that's a problem, and I want to know why.
So when it does change angular size, you've already said that it's because of other factors, right? So it's an automatically falsified observation if you do observe a change in angular size.
That's not what I said. Can I correct that? I'm asking you, that is if we're looking at the naked eye, which you should actually not do, but because of the effect of the sun on the eyeball. But I'm talking about looking at it through a camera, zoomed in for 3 days in a row, tracking it with an equatorial mount, which we're going to get to, which is a major problem for flat
solar
Earth.
filters.
Keeping it zoomed, following it and tracking it doesn't change a bit. So we can eliminate the issue with glare and perspective and human eye limitations and all of that because we have a device that can actually show that it does not change in angular size. That is a major problem for the flat Earth model.
So just address this multiple times. Yeah? Not actual size? Who gives a crap? Meanwhile, his audience can't hear a single word I'm saying.
Have all the answers.
You're not my guru, Patrick. I love you, man, but you're not a guru.
All right, but just think about what you're requiring right now, okay? We have already gotten to the point where you are completely stymied when it comes to showing that there's curvature of any kind. As visually,
Well, I think we disagree with that. I think there's a disagree to disagree.
Yeah,
Fine.
that's going.
Disagree to disagree when it's 2-on-1 and the other guests can't be heard and interject in any way.
I mean, my God, have the tests been done?
Have you done the test, Patrick?
By
Patrick,
people
have you
that
done the
don't know
test?
what they're doing, Patrick. By people
Patrick,
that
have you
Meanwhile, we're going to filibuster and talk through everything Patrick says with the other guest on mute.
Not done the test myself.
Okay, so how about this? Is
We're watching
information
YouTube,
warfare a thing that's happening these days?
Yes.
So how do we know that what you're
we'll do
seeing
the
and what
test
you're seeing on the
ourselves.
videos?
See, I want a concession though that when we do show, because I'm gonna have to demonstrate the actual math to you, because when we came
and I would
into this,
love that. By the
You
way,
got 4.5
All right,
seconds
very well.
before I got interrupted.
But here's the other thing. When you do see angular size change in the sun, which you can observe under a bunch of instances where the sky is where the air is very, very dry, will you agree that it is much more consistent with a moving, more local sun than with a stationary, ultra giant, very distant sun? Would you agree? Would you agree that a change in angular size of the sun under the right air conditions, because moisture in the air will cause lensing, will cause magnification, but a dry air example of the sun plainly getting smaller as it moves out of sight, wouldn't you agree that's much more consistent with a small and local sun?
Okay, thank you for. So that's that's being postulated by Flat Earth, right? That's the theory.
I asked you a question.
Yes. Okay. Yes. If you can show me that it changes angular size, then that's a point for your.
I have to give David Whitehead props here because this was a test by Patrick for intellectual honesty. Whitehead is passing the test. He said yes. Josh hasn't answered yet. Not that that would mean anything. Again, he makes it clear every time he opens his mouth he has a severe mental disability. So, I don't want to attack him because, the capability is just not there. So what's the point?
Side, because
Would it not falsify the notion that it's 93 million miles away and stationary?
well, yeah, because if it's actually changing in size, then I mean, there's probably more questions that have.
There it goes again. Actually changing in size when we're talking about angular size. Meanwhile, I'm muted, can't object, not allowed to interject into this conversation anymore. talking about actual size.
Oakley's like a 4-year-old. Not all, like, he can't, like, yes, he might be, what he's saying is true right now. But so what? Does he have to cry like a 4-year-old about it? You know, he could show some kind of maturity and just allow Patrick to do the talking at this moment.
Size changes when it's not actual size, angular.
The sun does not change in angular size. That's another experiment that we could do at the Badlands Media Conference. Okay, Nathan.
Not actual size change. Fourth time.
Change in angular size. Change in apparent size.
Not actual size.
Not actual.
Right. Perspective.
Yeah, exactly. I'm not saying the sun itself shrinks and expands and changes and turns into gummy bears. I'm saying, from my perspective, I should see the sun vanishing and moving in and becoming big. It would be the same with the moon. It would be the same with a lot of things, right? So we got to test that. And one way to test it is to get a high quality zoom camera with a solar filter mounted on an equatorial mount. And then that way we can track it over a period of days and then see if the sun itself actually changes in angular size.
Actually changes in not actual size? My God.
Sorry.
No worries. Let's just move on. It doesn't matter. Five times is enough. I'll just get muted again if I try and refute this, or
Josh,
my second attempt to refute it's now getting currently talked through.
Okay,
even though I've pointed out not actual size isn't actual size change.
This is a very simple observation that we could
Obviously, I'm going to get completely rumpus and talk through.
Yes, you are. Yes, you are.
Yeah, every time I've talked, I have. So why would I expect anything different?
Oh, yeah.
This is me angry. This is me getting angry, right?
No. You're just annoying, and that's just the fact.
Winning.
So
yeah, it's annoying for people who think they're really confident about Earth being a globe.
Keep telling yourself that, buddy. Josh, how about you give a shot on this? What do you think about this?
I'm not allowed to give it a shot? Oh, right. I was just on mute for 5 minutes.
Okay, actually, I just wanted to say, I'll go ahead and concede to Nathan if he wants to go ahead and give it.
Excellent.
I thought Nathan had already answered it 5 times, as he said.
So the equatorial mount, where does the concept of the equator come from? Do you know?
Go ahead and tell us.
It's your claim. You were talking about how wonderful the equatorial mount is for a flat Earth.
I'm talking about how the equatorial mount has a problem because it would have to rotate on 2 different axes in order for it to work, but it doesn't do that. And we're going to get to it, and I'll put the argument up for people to look for themselves. I want you to answer about the sun. Let's go with the sun. What do you say to that?
I just want to interject here. I think the equatorial mount actually is a fascinating point of discussion, and I'm actually surprised. I think this is the first debate I've seen where it was actually brought up. So let's see what they say about it.
Well, I thought we covered it. Why does the not actual size of the sun not change in not actual size as it moves from its not actual position throughout the day?
Actual size.
And my bad, I was in the middle of summarising your position. Obviously, this is me being angry, right? Me being angry, interrupting you. So why does the not actual size of the sun not change in not actual size as it moves from its not actual position? I'm not going to answer that, but I will carry on with asking you if you know where the equator for the equatorial plane has come from for a second time.
Well, it's based on the concept that Earth is a sphere. So there's an equator.
Wrong.
And
how is it derived then from a sphere? Tell me.
I don't know. Tell me.
Why did you make that claim?
And another bonus point for David Whitehead. Clearly, he's not so insecure. Like we've seen goofs like Sartain, so-called Professor Dave. How often have they said, I don't know? David Whitehead here is demonstrating that his ego doesn't have him on that short strings. He can freely admit he made assumptions. He didn't realize that he made those assumptions. So those were all fallacious, obviously. He didn't realize it. And now, intellectually, honestly, he's saying, oh, I don't know. I don't actually know. Because he was made to reflect. I mean, think about how much more productive these debates could be if Nathan Oakley just acted civil.
Hold on, I'm replying to him.
You just asked us to answer it.
He didn't know. I heard his answer. He said he didn't know.
I'm not a mathematician.
But you made a claim. My bad. I'm responding to you. You don't know. Now I'm responding to you because I do. You're not going to yield even though he doesn't know?
The equator is a line.
No, I'm telling you that I'm going to show you the argument. Okay, it's not. I'm just posing arguments here because I want to know how you guys respond to this stuff. Okay, this was an argument. This was a challenge that was posed by Red's Rhetoric. Once again, he even put a Mavic.
Do you want to get him on?
Pro.
Get him on
as a. Oh, I'd love to.
But you don't
but
know what you're talking
I'm
about.
just-
This is your
I'm just
claim.
I just want to put the
Stop
argument.
telling people
okay?
they
You don't know the argument. I'm
wanna
trying to
know.
address
Let's
it.
have a
I've already
discussion.
tried to
Yeah,
address it, and
fuck
every
this.
time I try and talk, somebody's talking through me. You
Because
don't know
all you're
where the
doing is just
equator.
saying the same thing
Same
over
thing
and
again.
over
Here we
and then
go.
trying to
My
strong-arm
God.
people
What is
to
your
level of the
problem?
Conversation. You're not even answering the freaking questions that David has been asking you.
What about the
I mean,
equator? I asked him where the equatorial
see
plane came
that-
from, and
see
he
how the
didn't know.
telescope's
And now
moving?
I'm getting talked through again.
Yeah.
You don't know where
Okay.
the
I'm
equatorial
going
plane
to
came
play that
from,
one
or
more
what
time.
the
This is
equator's.
what
My bad.
he
I'm
was
never going to
imaging.
get this
This is
statement
footage
out.
from Astronomy
Never going to
Live.
get the statement out.
And as you can see, in order to take that picture, notice how the telescope is only moving one axis. It's not pivoting here at all. It's pivoting down here at its base. See that?
Yep.
It's only moving one axis of rotation. Now, let's go ahead and go to an actual model. So what we're going to do is we are going to have a flat Earth model with an object rotating overhead. What does the telescope have to do in order to follow that object? Well, I'm seeing that that telescope on the flat Earth has to rotate two axes of rotation. Here's declination, and here's right ascension. So on the flat Earth model, it has to rotate two axes in order to follow a celestial object. Now, what about the globe? Let's go ahead and check out the globe right here.
I'm going to do a breakdown on the entire equatorial mount argument, what it could or couldn't prove in either model, and exactly how it works in very, very simple terms so everybody can understand if, and let's see how they handle it here, and then I'll do it.
So, on a globe, let's go ahead and let me fast forward here. Oh, there it is. So there's the globe model that we're going to use. The observers in Florida, as it was when Astronomy Live was doing his observation. And as you can see, there's declination, not moving whatsoever. And there's right ascension, moving as it should. So in reality, we only have to move one axis of rotation in order to follow a celestial object. The model needed in order for that to be the case is the round Earth model. And when we apply that to a flat Earth model, we then have to rotate two axes.
Wow, so that's a fundamental failure of understanding how the equatorial mount even works. I'm not going to put that as a fallacy for Whitehead simply because he's presenting information. If he reiterates it, then that would be fallacious. He's presenting information for dissection, which we will do. I just wanted to cut in there because so many of these videos and debates, of course, feature people who have no clue what they're talking about or how any of this actually works. And the sad part is, it's not rocket science. I mean, it's not like it's that advanced. I will dumb it down. I mean, I'll see if these guys do it. But yeah, it's so funny how they just jump in with all these false dichotomies, false causes, straw man I mean, they just stack all these fallacies in pretending and hallucinating that it couldn't be like this or it works because of this or that. I mean, just the stack of fallacies and statements like that are insane.
In order for it to follow a celestial object, i.e., there is a contradiction within the flat Earth model. So, given that equatorial telescope mounts work, do you have an answer for the geometric impossibility of an equatorial telescope mount working on a flat Earth?
I mean, that's a ridiculous claim. So first thing that they do is they attribute a model to Nathan and me. We have claimed no model. He picked a model that had that in order to watch the star, you have to have two axes of rotation. And then he said on his globe model, the axis is only one axis of rotation is required. So first of all, I claim no model. Second of all, that is called an affirming the consequent fallacy. It says, okay, we're going to sit here and imagine that we are on a ball rotating. And note that my telescope only has to rotate on one axis. The answer to that is, so what? If you did live on a ball, you would be able to measure the curvature of that ball. If you did rotate at 1,037 miles per hour at the equator, there would be a million different ways that you could verify that. You'd notice. You'd be able to get up in a hot air balloon and then just wait for the Earth to move under you and go there. You have flight times completely different from going east to west and west to east. This affirming the consequent fallacy that you just played for me it's literally proof of nothing. All right, Josh.
Yeah, no.
That's wow. Okay, so they didn't actually address the incomprehension of how the equatorial mount works, because that video was is just fundamentally failed to even understand how the mount works in the first place, and then based on that misunderstanding pretended and hallucinated all of these fallacies weren't fallacies in order to make that claim. I mean, that's one of the silliest videos I've ever seen. I mean, and that's saying a lot, but let's see what these guys come up with. I'm a little disappointed in Patrick. I thought he would bring up some of these basic points, but let's see.
Patrick, you said there's 1,000 different ways to prove if we were on a curved Earth, there's 1,000 different ways to prove it. Give us some of those, and let's have us and the audience and all of us go test that, because if
he just did, he just did give some. But again, wow, yeah, again, I don't want to attack the mentally disabled individual, so I guess, we'll humor him, we'll let him talk, not to hurt his feelings, I guess. I mean, I don't even know why he's on here, but
if that's false, right? If the Earth is not curved, and you said there's 1,000 different ways to test that if we were on a flat Earth, then we will be able to find out for ourselves by doing those tests. I mean, does that make sense?
Okay, I've already said the tests, so just to see if I got through.
Okay, go ahead.
Why don't you tell me what such a test would look like, because I've already explained how one would test such.
Well, maybe I missed that part. Maybe I was going to
literally.
He was just, he missed. Is there anything he didn't miss? I mean, that's the real question. Is there anything he didn't miss, or is there anything he actually did comprehend? Again, not an attack. I mean, the guy's just clearly not capable. The mental capacity is not there. So, I mean, this is on everybody else for expecting it to be there when it's not there.
The entire 2 hours we've been talking about it.
Are you referring to curvature, right?
I am.
Start off with that.
Okay. Well, why don't we just say this? Let's propose certain tests to each other, right? I don't think that we're ever going to come to any agreement on this conversation discussion. I think we can all understand that, right? And look, I'm open to new ideas and concepts. I'm here to learn on this planet.
As if he's capable of doing such. I mean, I admire that if he's being intellectually honest, which I actually don't even know if he is. I mean, obviously he's got a mental disability, but just because you have a mental disability doesn't mean you're going to be intellectually honest, however limited the intellectual capacity is.
Right? I'm here to expand in knowledge. And so what I would like is, if the Earth is flat, great, prove it to me. And the same thing with you. If the Earth is curved, great, prove it to you, right? I mean, this is kind of where we're at. And so let's propose, you guys come to us and say, okay, we'll test this. I don't want to test that the Earth is curved. I want to test that the Earth is flat. How would I do that?
Celestial
Give me those
navigation.
experiments.
With
What's that,
celestial
Nathan?
navigation.
With celestial, as you explained before, taking the sextant to the horizon. But I'd already said this, but, we're talking about 69 miles, 75 miles, that we have 1 degree of curve. So curve is negligent at shorter distances. So it's going to appear horizontal. That was my argument. Whether we agree or disagree with that, okay, I'm saying is, how else can we determine this? What other ways can we determine whether these theories or these different thoughts of flat or round Earth are true or false? I mean, let's truly utilize our resources, utilize our brain power, and get to the truth.
What brain power? I mean, it's nice that, he has a high opinion of himself, but that doesn't mean there's brain power where there is no brain power. Again, the suffrage from the Dunning-Kruger effect. Just because someone's mentally disabled doesn't mean they're not also suffering from the Dunning-Kruger effect, as he's proving here. I mean, this is more of an exercise in understanding psychology versus anything else at this point with Josh. I mean, he should just not talk if we want to focus on anything logical here.
And I'm okay with that. Yes. I'm okay with doing experiments, is that you guys say, hey, Josh, you know what? Let's go out there and let's test this, or test this. Or David, how about this? At noon every day, go out there and, at noon my time and with the same corresponding time as David's time zone, we'll measure the angle of the sun in the sky, and we'll come up with we'll see what we can do, right? These are things that we can do. Instead of going back and forth, I mean, Patrick, you said there's no model for flat Earth, or that you claim no model for flat Earth. The same thing with you, Nathan. And I completely understand that. I don't want to sit here and try to break down a flat Earth model when you guys don't have a model. But my question is that if we're going to claim that the Earth is flat, how do I know this? And it can't come about through debunking curved Earth. Does that make sense?
Because all of the maps and models that you use, including a globe, were made using flat Earth elevation angle measurements to Polaris. Without exception, your globe model included, they're all flat. They're all derived from flat measurements. The same flat measurements that you use to navigate. That's an elevation angle measurement off a flat baseline. When you describe the 1 degree for every 60 nautical miles, that's 1 degree of declination of the star in your sextant, not 1 degree of a curved Earth. You're measuring.
Well, I'm actually, Patrick.
Nathan.
My
bad. I'm just answering your question after a long, prolonged request for us to prove the flat Earth to you. I'm just answering that. Not lots of waffle and prefacing. Just answering
on what I said, so I wanted to correct that. If that's okay, is that okay to do that? If you made an incorrect assumption on what I said, I took the circumference of the Earth, divide by 360, you get 69 miles. I was given an approximation of about 75 miles. And this equates to 1 degree. If a circle's 360 degrees, I think we can all agree on that. If we divide 360 by the circumference of the Earth, as in the sense of the globe Earth model, we should get 1 degree of arc length. Can we all agree on that? That makes sense?
I can agree that if you beg the question that the surface is a spherical one, that you can get 1 degree of 360. However, in practical application, when navigating the surface of the Earth and referencing elevations to sea level, you can measure the declination of stars in the sky based on a flat Earth angle. Yes, I appreciate you can beg the question that means the surface is curving, but you can't get elevation angle measurements from a curved surface.
But see, and so for everybody out there, and so kind of what me and Nathan are saying is I'm not disagreeing with him on the sense of how a sextant works. And I did say that before. Am I correct on that?
That proves Earth's flat then.
No, it does not.
Yes, it does.
What it shows you is that the sextant being used as a local instrument to the horizon is predominantly a flat horizontal plane.
It's incorrect.
That's why that works.
No, you're measuring the GP position of the star, and the angle you have to it beyond the horizon could be several thousand miles.
But that
I'm just correcting you.
What?
Is it okay if I correct you?
To the horizon.
No, to the GP of the star. I know you don't like being wrong, but when you measure the flat plane, that's the flat Earth baseline, the elevation angle to the star is beyond the horizon, flat for many thousands of miles, and described in navigation as an area of equal elevation. That's a flat plane beyond the horizon.
And technically, just because something is described as such, and just because it works, that doesn't mean that we're going to fall for false dichotomies and say it's the only way it could work, like Nathan Oakley does. So using correct information, obviously, you could still commit fallacies, and obviously the fallacy means just because you're committing a fallacy doesn't mean you're incorrect. For all the people triggered by all of the fallacies Nathan Oakley's racking up here.
So Nathan, can you show me in the sense, if we're talking here, so I don't know if everybody in the audience knows what a sextant is, okay? Right? Can you show us how this would work? If I had a sextant, how am I measuring this?
You're measuring a flat baseline.
Is there different parts of the sextant? We got an audience here as well, man, right? So I'm just trying to extrapolate as much information for everybody as possible, right?
Sextant
is
the
audience going back and forth with this.
Maybe the audience knows what a protractor is, and then we can kind of give them an idea that you're measuring an angle using 2 straight lines.
One of which is acquired by pointing the sextant at the horizon and leveling the tool. If you're on a ship, obviously rocking back and forth,
correct,
you rock the sextant to get it lined up with the horizon. That is what you do to establish the baseline. That's a flat line to measure an angle. You'll be measuring that baseline, and once you've got it, you can measure the angle to the star. Now, that angle will be minus from 90 and times by 60 to give you the distance to the GP. That's the ground position of the star. That would be, or sun, or moon, or whatever else you're measuring in the sky. That ground position is the position where the sun or star is directly above at that time. Now, your horizon, if you're very low to the ground, might only be a couple of miles away. But you're establishing a horizontal baseline with a ground position below that star. That's a flat Earth. It can only be measured flat. That's what an angle is. There's my flat Earth proof. Not agree to disagree.
Okay.
It's not a claim either. It just is celestial navigation. My claim
So Nathan,
with
let me ask you this.
my claim with celestial navigation is that you cannot acquire an elevation angle measurement for celestial navigation if the Earth has a curved surface. It can only be done. It's a prerequisite that Earth must be flat to perform celestial navigation. I'm not.
Is there a required distance for that horizon to be for this to work? Yes or no?
No.
Oh, so I could do it in my. So if I was, let's just say I'm outside and I have a table on a ship, I could use the edge of that table to determine the flat baseline.
No.
Why not?
Because the table's on a ship moving around on the sea. That's why you use the horizon.
But there is no distance requirement to use this. We only have to have a required horizontal base, correct?
Yeah, you look in the horizon mirror, not the table mirror.
Okay. So, like you said, though, is the horizon can be very far away or it can be closer. So there's no.
We are clear that the horizon's not a table. I just
Right,
I'm
GP.
clear. I just want to make sure you understand. You understand the horizon isn't a table.
I understand, but the table is a flat plane.
But it's not a horizon, which is what you look at in the sextant in the horizon mirror.
Correct. And that's kind of where I was saying is I agree with you on how the sextant works. But
With a
that
flat
does
plane.
not equate to the Earth being flat.
It can't not be. It can't.
If he understands, why is he bringing up a table? I know. I really shouldn't focus on trying to pick apart this guy, this poor guy with a mental disability. He's clearly not aware that he has a severe mental disability. Nobody wants to hurt his feelings, so nobody told him, so he can never move beyond it or progress in any way. So I really just shouldn't even address anything he says, but this is a logical analysis, so... Yeah, I mean, I'm going to get to the Equatorial Mountain in a second because they seem to have gotten off of that and back to sextants, but I just want them to see if they address it further.
Measure an angle. If one of the lines is curved, then it wouldn't be an angle, would it?
Well, it's not a precise instrument. It's not
It is.
100,000%.
It's an angle measuring
It's an
device. That's
approximate
pretty precise.
instrument.
Yes, it is. You're wrong.
It's pretty precise. It's
Very.
an approximation.
Yeah, very. It's an
Pretty
angle. It just
precise.
measures angles.
Right. And that's because the distance from a person to the horizon is predominantly flat because the curvature is insignificant at that level.
No, you're using the horizon to establish a flat baseline that could extend thousands of miles beyond the horizon in order to get the GP position of the star so that you can navigate by finding your position with that GP across a circle
give
of
me an
equal... My bad,
example
still
of
in the
the
middle of
horizon
explaining how Earth's flat to you.
1,000
My bad,
miles
just proving Earth's flat to you. My bad.
Don't
A
get
circle,
triggered. I'm
I'll try
asking
again
you
for a third
question through
time.
your own
A
words.
circle of equal elevation. That's a flat circle. No elevation change. Flat.
Anyways. Thank you,
Seriously,
Nathan. I appreciate that.
Josh, we
Okay.
have been here. We have been here. We have been here for 2.5 hours, Josh. We have spent most of this time talking about why the curvature is undetectable, how we would go about detecting that curvature. This is just a listening kind of question. How would we design that demonstration to measure the curvature of the Earth?
Well, you can take two people in different parts of the country or relatively far away, right? And we can measure the sun at equal times of the day. Now, if the Earth is flat, we can make approximations of what those angles will look like. And the Earth is curved, we can make approximations of what the
angle?
curvature would look like. I
You'll
correct?
need
on
flat
that?
Earth for those
I mean,
angles.
first of all, no, it has nothing to do with curvature. But you did hear me when I said that the curvature would be 8 inches times the square of the miles.
Right, but that's an approximation, and that breaks down
Nope,
after
nope,
about 100 miles.
It is
Absolutely, it breaks
accurate.
down.
It is incredibly
It's incredibly accurate for short distances.
Yes.
You know this, Patrick. It's
I
incredibly
do. Yes,
accurate for short distances.
I'm literally a mathematician. I know how to
Great.
study circles.
Great. And so it's incredibly accurate for short distances because the curvature of the Earth at short distances is insignificant. But as you get further towards 100 miles, like 69, 70 miles, that equation starts to break down and no longer works because curvature. Yes, it does.
Okay, so this is where, can I just jump in real quick here? Can I just jump in real quick?
That is a blatant falsehood.
Okay, well, then here's what we do. We
reasonable.
test it to us.
Yeah,
us
let's
physically
test
test it in reality. That would be the proper, because obviously we're not going to convince each other, but
So I just want to give David Whitehead some more credit here. Because it appears that Patrick is actually getting more. Patrick and Josh are the most triggered ones now, which is crazy. Because even other than those little moments, even Nathan Oakley calmed down. Other than when he was being interrupted, he was speaking much more calmly than even Patrick and Josh. I mean, this is a really crazy debate. David Whitehead, I would say, is the most level-headed out of all of them in terms of emotional control, other than when Nathan Oakley was interrupting. But here, you see, instead of getting triggered like Josh or even like Patrick, Whitehead is calmly trying to provide alternatives. Now, let's say Whitehead's IQ is very low. Again, I don't know if he was replaced by a clone, because this used to be a really smart guy. But regardless of how low it is, the civility and the calmness in accepting what was just said, at least accepting to the point of not arguing like a 4-year-old against it like Josh, or even Nathan. But I just want to appreciate that David Whitehead is the kind of guy. Obviously he's either severely limited and he actually hasn't done any research at all, that he doesn't even know the most basic claims or the fundamentals of horizon versus true horizon, how perspective works, convergence, all of these things. Now the equatorial mount, a lot of people don't really understand how that works. So that's, I don't know if I should use the word forgivable, but that it's understandable to a certain extent. That although I would have expected Nathan and Patrick to both know how it works, because they seem to be very well versed in all of these arguments on both sides. They seem well versed in how it works on both sides. But that's the fact that Whitehead is still calm and civil even after all that. I just want to appreciate this, because we don't usually see this, especially not from the Globe side.
this is for the sake of the audience.
Fair
we
enough.
want to see no. We want to see the different arguments for and against the flat Earth, right? We want to see where's the contradictions, where's the flaws. I think the sun is a really good experiment that we can do. There's other experiments
There's no
we can do.
experiment happening here. Okay.
No.
What do you mean by the sun is an experiment? What does that even mean?
How
Not the
do
sun is an
we change
experiment.
out
We do an
experiment with
experiment.
test?
A test. Okay.
better?
A
Is
test.
that
Let
better
David
word?
finish. I want to hear what he's going to
I
say.
still don't know
It's the
what
best
the test
word
is. The sun
to
test.
do some of these things to try to find out
We've
if
spent this
the
whole time
claims
talking
made.
about the curvature
Oh,
of the
Patrick,
Earth.
Patrick,
And
hold
you're
on,
talking
hold on.
about
Patrick,
the
Patrick,
curvature of the Earth by
Patrick.
measuring an angle to the
Okay,
sun.
wait a
That
sec.
makes
Let me
literally no
just-
sense.
finish
Patrick,
this
please,
sentence.
please,
Let me
Patrick.
just Nathan, okay.
I want to hear what you're saying,
So-
David. Go ahead, David.
Well, we gotta wrap this up. No offense, but I do have to go because we are coming up on a very long time of this show, which is okay.
Okay.
It's great.
Here's
but
another
I do have
experiment
to
we
go
can do
here
really
soon.
quickly. I'm going to take it through. You guys know about the midnight sun. Speaking of the sun, so first experiment would be tracking the sun for days on end to see if there's an angular change in our perspective of the size of the sun.
But would that prove anything either way? See, again, regardless of how civil Whitehead is, if he doesn't have the fundamentals of the scientific method, I would say he has a general idea of what science and experiments are, but he has not demonstrated a clear understanding of what separates a scientific experiment from a non-scientific experiment purporting to be a scientific experiment. And again, this comes down to dependent variables, independent variables, and controls, all clearly delineated and accounted for. I mean, that's what he's missing, and that it's quite a fundamental.
Okay, I'm not talking about the actual size of the sun. That's one thing. Another thing, we could look at this, Kiruna, Sweden, right? And just really quickly, This was something that one of my followers on Telegram had sent in. I just want to propose it. Okay. In Kiruna, Sweden, the sun stays up continually, never setting, for 2 months in June and July. Yet 8,400 miles away in Australia, it still comes up every day. The total straight line flight distance from Kiruna, Sweden to Perth, Australia is just over 8,000 miles, right? Now, given that we have the sun up over 2 points on the Earth that are 8,400 miles apart, given that the flat Earth sun visibility of 9,000 to 10,000 miles, those who live in America should see the sun at the same time as Kiruna, and Australia sees it, as we are only 4,400 miles from Kiruna.
Again, fundamental failure of understanding how the burden of proof logical fallacy works. So presupposing variables is not scientific. I bring this up all the time, whether using a flat map, a globe map, it doesn't matter. If you have not definitively proven the size of the continents and the distances from each other, because again, on a small scale, this can all and has been done by, I believe, both flat earthers and globe earthers. Like if you're going a really short distance, like on a Cessna flight, I mean, there are flat earth pilots or pilots purporting to be flat earthers on a short distance flight from, a certain point in Mexico to the U.S. Like you can verify those distances, or even driving in some instances. You can verify certain distances from each other. And you can also verify the size of the United States. Let's say you drive from the south of Texas all the way up to the northernmost point in Montana. You can verify those distances, and then you can compare them to Mexico, whatever, on a small scale. Now, if someone has empirically verifiable, definitive evidence on the true size of all continents as a whole and the distance to other continents, now again, I think it has been done for maybe 2. Has anybody done it for all of them? Using very, very precise, empirically verifiable measurements from multiple points of reference. Multiple points of reference. If that hasn't been done, presupposing the distances like Whitehead just did, as if it would prove something either way, is obviously very silly and unscientific.
And only 8,100 miles from Australia. And I got the exact distances there from Atlanta to Sweden. So we could just get some people in Sweden, get some people in Atlanta. We know the mile distance, and then we can start looking at the sun. On a flat Earth, we should, but we get nothing but total blackness. We get total blackness because of the curvature of the Earth as the sun is on the other side. Even in a plane at 36,000 feet high and the flat Earth model of the sun being only 3,000 miles high, we can't see the sun in the USA while it's up over Kiruna and Australia.
So again, I don't know if Nathan and Patrick are going to dumb this down to the level it needs to be dumbed down. David Weiss actually does a decent job of this. But again, if you're in a giant warehouse and you have a light that's without presupposing, like he's presupposing distance of the sun, presupposing size of the sun, or how wide the sun moves and at what speed, etc., and he's presupposing the distances of the continents. That's why this wouldn't prove anything either way until you handle those variables first. Not rocket science, basic scientific method. But just as a really quick example to understand the concept, theoretically, if you go into a giant, you could actually do this non-theoretically, but it's an extrapolation of it. In a giant warehouse several miles wide, if there's, let's say, a moving light bulb on a track, and it's not that the ceiling of the warehouse is not that high in relation to how wide the warehouse floor is. Eventually, the light would go so far that you would not see it. And if you want to super dumb this down, I'm not claiming this is congruent, but just to get an idea of how it theoretically could work, take a flashlight, move it around a table. Is the flashlight going to, when it's really close to the table, then move it higher? Obviously, the higher it goes, the more the light's going to spread. But the lower it goes, the smaller the space that would be directly illuminated. Not rocket science.
So why can't we see the sun in America during the time that Kiruna and Australia see it, given the flat Earth model or proposition about the sun? So
model?
that's
What is
the
the-
argument that's posed.
What is the assumption? What is the begging the question assumption that took place in this argument? Just think of this as like a little pop quiz on the nature of the flaw in this logic.
Mhm.
What is assumed by these
that
people?
the Earth is curved.
Yep.
So that means I'm telling you, this is the experiment. This is another experiment we could do.
It's an
Okay,
affirming,
it's
the, it's
demonstration
another
of
affirming the
false.
consequent formal logical fallacy. If P, then Q.
Okay.
Q, therefore P.
So this experiment is a logical fallacy, Nathan? Is that what you're saying?
Yes.
Because it's already assuming that the Earth is curved. And I
that-
understand what
and
you're
it's
saying.
No,
also
it's
assumes-
showing you that if this phenomena is happening, there's a contradiction that shows itself for the flat concept of the Earth.
It
Based on a
assumes a
model
stationary
straw man.
sun.
That we haven't claimed.
Yeah, that's
It assumes a stationary sun.
It's
How
called a
so?
false dichotomy and a straw man. So I haven't claimed this model, and you're burning it in false dichotomy.
So no, it's because it begs the question about why in Kiruna, Sweden.
Again, I have to give props to David Whitehead. He is either a very good actor or he is genuinely attempting to understand the fallacy that took place here. Look at his face. He's not triggered. He's not yelling. He's not all worked up. He appears to be genuinely attempting to understand the fallacy, whereas Josh, obviously, you could just tell by the space between the eyes. What are you expecting there?
You got 24-hour sunlight for a period of the year, yet in not that far away, you have people that are seeing the sun rise and set.
Therefore,
So
the
they're
Earth's a sphere.
saying there's an issue here that would
Not
not
that
work
far.
out
Therefore,
if
the
it
Earth's
was
a
a
sphere.
flat surface
You
and the
literally,
sun was acting in the way that it would have to on a flat Earth.
you just formalized. You literally went through the affirming the consequent. You verbalized it in the perfect form. That's an affirming the
Okay, so-
consequent formal logical fallacy.
So this is not a good experiment to do.
It's not an experiment at
You
all
wouldn't
because
expect
there's
it, or a
what's the
test.
fun?
It
Okay,
wouldn't be a te- it wouldn't be a good
okay.
test
Stop. What's the first step in the scientific method, please, David?
to make an observation.
No, incorrect. Observation of a phenomenon. That's something occurring that you want to know the cause of.
That's an observation.
That's
No. That's an incomplete statement because there's nothing
Okay,
to
fine.
explain
Pick
the
it apart.
cause of
It's the
if
same
nothing.
shit.
My bad.
know what I
My
mean.
bad. I'm just correcting you. I know it's painful. There's
Okay,
nothing
buddy.
to study the cause
You
of
get
if
picked
nothing
on a lot?
happened.
Like, what's up with the
Third
hackles
attempt. I
being
know
up
it's
the whole
painful
time?
when you're wrong. It's not
I wasn't
observation
wrong. I said to make an observation.
of a naturally occurring phenomenon.
It's not
I
changing
realise
the
that
science, and
now
I
four
see it
people
going
are
over the horizon.
talking
They
while
have
I'm
an
trying to make the
observation.
correction. I know you don't like being corrected. It's not me being angry. It's just the fourth attempt for me to say you're wrong. That's an incorrect assertion. Because an
He has the
observation,
question.
Get anywhere with
fifth
this
attempt,
shit. We
fifth
can't get
attempt to show
anywhere.
why he's wrong. Fifth attempt.
Yeah.
Can't get anywhere.
Listen,
It's
right,
only the
guys,
fifth
we
attempt to
can't get
finish
anywhere.
this
Nathan,
statement.
fifth attempt, because I honestly,
Fifth attempt.
honestly, man,
I'm not
Here's
allowed
what's
to
gonna
correct him then. He's just not
he
allowed
asked
to be
a
wrong.
question.
Not
No,
allowed
no,
to be
no,
wrong.
no,
He
this
wasn't
is just-
wrong. He asked
Yeah, he
you
was.
a
Now got
question.
muted.
don't
I
understand
love
how
it.
that's-
So for my audience's benefit, I can mute them too on my recording and say that this fuckwit doesn't know what science is. Science involves observation of a naturally occurring phenomena. That's step one in the scientific method. It's an incomplete statement to say observation is first step. So he mutes me. After he rinses and repeats 4 times and I say, no, you're going to have my correction. No, I'll be muted by the host. Yeah, neutral platform, this one. Yeah, I'm not allowed to be correcting anybody on the panel when they're wrong about what science is.
$10. I now believe the Earth is flat. Thanks a lot, fellas. Like I didn't have enough things going on. LOL. The round Earth guys are just talking over and have no arguments. They are looking foolish to me. All right.
Yeah, even
And see, again, we have to give Whitehead credit. How many people would have actually read that? Like, do you honestly think, like a goof like McToon or a goof like so-called Professor Dave, do you honestly think they would have read a comment like that? I mean, maybe. I don't know. I haven't seen. But judging from their extreme narcissism and how their ego has them on such short strings, with David Whitehead, I'm giving him the benefit of the doubt here. This might just be a fundamental ignorance across the board, but not necessarily intellectual dishonesty.
the audience knows, not only am I being talked over, I'm being muted whenever I correct him, and he doesn't like being corrected. So you can see on screen now, host has muted you.
We're disappointing. We couldn't.
David, if you're the host, you're a scumbag. You've muted your guests just because you're wrong and don't know what science is. My audience will hear how wrong you are while you've got me on mute with this little label saying, the host muted your mic. How epic. How unbelievably rude. You invite me on your show, I come here for free, and all you can do is mute me. The audience knows how scum...
This is all obvious. There's no need to add hum. Like, again, if Oakley had any level of intellectual maturity, he wouldn't. I mean, he could make a reference like he did previously, but at this point, you know, he's muted and he's just rambling these ad homs. You know, he would be a much stronger point if he just stayed quiet. Take it in stride. Let the actions of Whitehead speak for themselves.
You've been talking through every last word we've said, but you feel the need to mute me as I tell you how you don't know how science works. Epic.
As E. That is the statement. Just want to make sure we got through all of that. Okay. All right. So those are our Rumbles days. Thank you so much for that. Thanks for tuning in. And let me just do this. Let's do, because I know everybody's got to run, like a 60-second closing statement to wrap it up. And let's start with Patrick.
We just spent 2 hours and 45 minutes seeing the same fallacy over and over again. We talked about the curve. And every single time we had one of two things. One, it was argued that you can't see the curvature because it's insignificant, which is untrue. Or that I have pictures that look like there's curvature. And then we had a situation where nobody wants to just take a telescope and say, if we can see at this great distance, then there is no curvature. It's that simple. And there are two other major arguments that we didn't even get a chance to get to. One, there is no evidence of axial rotation. And two, there is no evidence that the sky is a vacuum, because then the air we breathe would fill the space and we would all be dead. Thank you.
I think you're muted, Josh. I can't hear you.
Josh, I can't hear you, Josh.
So I said over to Nathan. Nathan, it's you, man. Go.
Oh, my
Nathan.
bad. Right. Okay, sorry. Yeah, the main way we've been poisoned into belief of a sphere is by misapprehensions about what the scientific method is. And it was very appropriate that I just got muted by the host when trying to correct him on observation being the first step in the scientific method. That's wrong. It's observation of something occurring, so you can establish the cause of the effect. Do systematic experimentation based on a valid hypothesis. That is science. It's empirical, and the illusion of science has been used to deceive you into believing that things like blink tests have empiricism behind them when they don't. So if you want to find out more about how you've been deceived into believing you're on a sphere by way of pseudoscience, that's defined as a claim of science when there has not been an application of the scientific method, then come and watch Flat Earth Debate on Nathan Oakley 1980. You can even join. There's a link published to the public every single day that you can join the debate and express your views on the nature of Earth. Thank you very much indeed to Josh and David for having me. You've been extremely tolerant, and although it's difficult to hear us proving you wrong, and I've been muted many times in the past, I still thank you for having me. I really appreciate it, and thank you, Patrick, for inviting me along.
Josh.
Muted, so I was talking there, thanking Patrick and Nathan. But no, listen, Nathan, thank you so much. I appreciate it. Seriously, I do. Because if this is really about the truth, then let's find the truth. Am I right on that? If this is really about the truth, let's find the truth. But I would say that let's do this again. We can come back and touch on the other issues that Patrick was talking that we didn't get to, right? But also, and I know that you said there's no flat Earth model that you guys absorbed. That's great. But let's just have the assumption that we don't know whether the Earth is flat or round. And let's figure out some tests that we can do to determine whether it is either or. And I don't think that that's a horrible thing. And I know, Nathan, you want to say some stuff on this. But I'm just saying is I think that everybody can understand it. There we are. That if there is tests that we can do, let's do them. And if there is tests that we can't do because either one's not going to prove either that, then we're all wrong. Nobody does know.
All right, I finally have to give Josh credit. He's finally exhibited a modicum of comprehension. That's interesting. So clearly he's not a complete vegetable. He does have the ability to understand maybe some 3-year-old concepts. Yes, it would improve it either way, unless you can clearly determine all of the variables and have controls, which, as of yet, all of these tests do not.
And so I think that we can use this. And by the way, observation. I understand what you were saying in the sense of observation of phenomena, but observation is the kind of like the taking of your senses of the change of the external environment. So that is a phenomena. So observation kind of does define actually what observation is. So, but either way is we can use the observational evidence, the optional things that come into a self-evident truth that we see within ourselves. And we can develop various different models.
And now he's just going into verbal diarrhea of some terms he memorized but doesn't understand them. I mean, I think he's over 60 seconds anyway.
Whether it's curved Earth or flat Earth, and we can come back and we can say, hey, look, the Earth is flat because, or the Earth is curved because. And I think that would be a very healthy thing to do for this group of men here who have really good levels of intelligence and understandings.
I mean, at least he's got self-esteem. I mean, you got to give him that.
On these topics, that we all come together and say, hey, look, let's figure out some tests that we can all do and determine this. And the next time we come in, we present the evidence for those tests and we look at the results of those tests and we compare that and we see what makes the most sense. You know what? Honestly, if the Earth's flat, great. I want to be proven it, right? And that doesn't come about by yelling at each other and arguing. And the same thing goes to you guys. If the Earth's curved and you wanted it proved to you, it doesn't come about through argumentation. I think we all understand that. And I think that we all can have a great discussion about this. But let's try to develop a format for this, testing it. David and I can run some tests. Nathan and Patrick can run some tests. And we can come back and say, hey, look, this is what we found. This is what the data says. And let the audience and ourselves all decide from that. Does that sound like a good idea?
Sounds like a good idea.
Yeah.
Anything else, Josh?
No, I appreciate it. I appreciate Nathan and Patrick. I mean, I think that I go by Romans 12:2. Do not conform to the pattern of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. And that's taking in new information so you don't just fall into the same continuous aspect that your environment is giving you or the information warfare that's going on is giving you. We don't want to react to our environment. We want to be completely consciously active within it. And I think it's important to hear different perspectives and different points of mathematics and how this actually works, right? Because science is not set in stone. You know, in the late 19th century, oh, absolutely. In the late 19th century, they thought they had everything they thought they knew about physics because of Newtonian physics. Obviously, Einstein came wrong. And I honestly, by the way, Nathan, I disagree with the majority of Einstein. And then maybe that'd be a great discussion to talk about that someday, right? But here's the thing, is science is not set in stone. Science is a dynamic system that's continuously changing. And I think you understand that as well, in the sense that if we're going to look at the Earth, that we're evolving our information.
I mean, that's just saying, I mean, this is verbal diarrhea endemic. I mean, he's just spinning his wheels, trying to appear like he actually comprehended something, other than the point about these certain tests or experiments brought up not proving anything either way. That's the only really thing he seemed to have understood, and that precipitation exists, but he ignored it in other instances, even though he brought it up. So yeah, I mean, just not a lot of cognitive function all around, and now he's just spinning his wheels. I mean, the level of insecurity, I mean, is this all false bravado when he's calling himself intelligent, which clearly he's not. I mean, this is a mentally disabled individual. I mean, I don't know anybody who would dispute that after listening to this. Because, I mean, there's just no capacity, almost no capacity here. Not complete brain dead vegetable, but kind of close.
On it. That's a dynamic system. It's continuously changing as more information comes into the system. That's systems theory. Yes, that is very true. As more information comes in, you have more understanding of that system if you can extrapolate that data in a meaningful form. Anyways, I just say that next time we go about it, let's come and have a format. Let's have maybe Nathan and Patrick come back and say, Josh and David, this is this. We come up with some tests, and Josh and David go back to Nathan and Patrick and say, hey, if the Earth is flat, this is what we're looking at. This is what we would expect. Can you show us? And I think we go into like that because I think that would bring about a good basis for the audience to make a determination.
Again, if Josh particularly, I think David Whitehead could understand either there's something weird going on and he's like an Illuminati clone shill or something, or, I mean, I don't know what's going on with him, but I think he has the mental capacity to understand the basics of the scientific method, how the independent and dependent variable works with controls to actually conduct an experiment scientifically. Clearly, Josh is not capable of understanding this, so none of this would help him. But yeah, let's see if they wrap this up soon, because this is getting really painful.
As well as our own selves.
Yes, exactly. And just so you know, guys, still love you, Nathan. We had a good sparring match. I was told by John that this had to get heated so we could get more viewers, and I think we hit over like 4,000 viewers. So well done, mate. No hard feelings. Patrick, thank you so much. We don't have to agree on everything, and everybody watching, we don't have to agree on everything.
And again, look how non-triggered David Whitehead is. I mean, does anybody think that's a non-genuine statement from him? Look at it. His face betrays nothing. Either he's this phenomenal actor or he's legitimately not triggered. In which case, that makes him one of the best people, but on the other hand, also one of the most ill-prepared.
We're all investigating truth together. My focus personally is what's happening on the earth, regardless of the shape. I'm not saying that this discussion isn't important, but I think we can all agree that we are living in the age of tyranny, lies, and deception, and it's up to each and every one of us to utilize our minds and every part of ourselves to try to find out what is the truth. And in doing that, it's important to look at the opposite opinion of what you currently hold and test yourself constantly against it. The last thing I'm going to drop here is just an address to people in the chat and other people that have sent me that look at this from a more religious perspective. That wasn't the topic of today's debate. I'm not going to bring it up any more than this. Just to give you someone that I agree with on his position. His name's Giordano Bruno, and he was actually burnt at the stake by the Vatican in the year 1600 for going against the dogma of the church.
Or was he? I actually brought up some info on him on the other analysis I did on Sartain, who's obviously still the champ.
And this is what he had to say. He says, God is infinite, so his universe must be too. Thus is the excellence of God magnified and the greatness of his kingdom made manifest. He is glorified not in one, but in countless suns, not in a single earth, a single world, but in 1,000,000, I say, an infinity of worlds.
And is that all on a flat plane, like all these infinite snow globe systems? Or is it presupposing space?
And whether you agree with that or not, it's just a philosophical thought that for those of you who think that looking at the world as a sphere or that there is the reality of an infinite universe or a vast universe, that somehow contradicts creation, contradicts a God, or contradicts Christianity or your cherished belief systems. I have a channel on Telegram that you can go. I'm a collector of refutations to this argument. And
he doesn't even know the difference between a true horizon and an apparent horizon. And he hasn't seen a single video of people zooming in ships going allegedly over the horizon. And he doesn't have an understanding of ways. Again, I'm a fan of this guy, or at least I was. I mean, I still am, just because how non-triggered he is. But I'm just really disappointed. I wouldn't be disappointed if I wasn't a fan, because there'd be nothing to be disappointed about. But I'm just really disappointed. This is the least triggered individual running a flat earth debate. And also possibly the most ill-prepared.
Love me or hate me for that. At least you have the challenges to all the points that have been brought up. You can find it on Telegram. It's called Flat Earth Refuted. And I'm also posting a link from a friend of mine who's a theologian and biblical scholar who disagrees that the Bible actually says there's a flat earth. And he's got all of his arguments there. He's got a free PDF book. So I just wanted to address that. That could be a topic for a different debate, a different time. But I want to thank everybody for being here. Thanks to Badlands Media for allowing us to be here to host this. I don't personally want to turn my entire career into debating flat earth, but if we want to do some stuff in the future, I'm more than open, and I'd love to do those experiments. So thank you, gentlemen. Thanks to our audience. Much love. The truth is going to win, and I wish you all well. Cheers, everybody.
Night, guys.
Okay, so they did not go over the equatorial mount, so let's go over that right now. So this is a video, pretty informative.
New astronomers, Michael here, and today I'm going to introduce new astronomers to the equatorial mount. As seen in my previous video, my first telescope was mounted on what's called an altazimuth mount. When I bought my second telescope, it was mounted on what's called an equatorial mount. And as expected, my first night of viewing was filled with frustration because I was struggling on how to use the telescope. So I'm hoping that this video would help new astronomers how to use their new equatorial mount. If you've used both, you probably know the difference between these two types of mounts. The altazimuth mount is the same type of mount more commonly used as camera tripods. This makes it more intuitive because it seems like the camera can slew in almost any direction. It doesn't reorient the telescope, and also it requires balancing in only one axis. Compared to an equatorial mount, it seems a little bit more counterintuitive. It seems to only want to move in one axis at a time. Also, it can reorient the telescope in some awkward positions, as well as the balancing aspect. You need to balance it in both axes. Having said all that, why would anybody want to recommend using an equatorial mount? Well, in fact, it's actually for the same reasons that I mentioned earlier. The restrictions of an equatorial mount actually is an advantage when you're tracking an object. Equatorial mounted telescopes allow you to track objects a lot more easier because it'll only require you to make adjustments in one axis, which is the right ascension. Compared to an altazimuth mount, you would need to adjust both the vertical and the horizontal axis. It just makes it a lot more enjoyable. It keeps the object within the field of view longer, so you'll have more time observing than adjusting. The second advantage is that it'll keep the object in the field of view in the same orientation. Because without reorienting your telescope, you'll start to observe image rotation. And that is a disadvantage when you're doing astrophotography. What I mean by image rotation is as an object in the sky, or for example, a constellation rises from the horizon, it might appear sideways. As it moves higher into the sky, it'll start to become more upright. And in long exposures, this will result in blurring. So I'm going to try to explain this in as simple terms as possible. I'm going to simulate what it would look like if I were to operate my telescope out in the field using this software called Stellarium. This is a planetarium software that you can download for free off the internet. I'm going to start off by facing south. And my location is in the northern hemisphere near Toronto, Ontario. I'm going to turn on the azimuthal grid lines. Now these are the grid lines that you use as a coordinate system if you were using an altazimuth mount.
So again, the reason I like this program is it really kind of shows you that if the world really is like a planetarium, you can see how the cathedral of stars, if you will, would be moving around the flat plane like a snow globe. Doesn't mean that that's what's happening, but if it's what's happening, you can clearly see how it would work and how it could match what you are seeing regardless of where in the world you are. You could also use it to give you an understanding of why the star rotation in the alleged southern hemisphere, again, presupposing hemisphere, but whatever, in the lands that would be in the southern hemisphere or outside of the circle of the northern hemisphere on a flat map. Either way, you could see it same way as if you spin in an office chair pointing at an object down, and you spin in the same direction but do it up at the ceiling. You will look like you're going to the opposite direction, even if you're not. Again, very basic concepts that not everything is as it appears to be, and it depends on where you are in relation to other things. Not rocket science, but for whatever reason, people on both sides of this debate have a hard time with this very basic concept. This software obviously helps a lot in picturing it. And I'm going to bring up another video in a little bit, but here you could see that if we'll get to exactly what the equatorial plane is. So if you're measuring against an equatorial plane, so if there's a flat surface against the alignment with Polaris, why would it be expected to work differently on a flat plane? But let's continue.
If you were to take your altazimuth mount and pointed it straight up overhead, the highest point would be located around here. This point is called the zenith. This is where the vertical axis of the mount is pointed at. Now, observe what happens if I were using an equatorial mount. The grid line system that it uses is called an equatorial grid. If I were to turn that on, you'll notice that the zenith is not there. In fact, the zenith where it used to be is located, from my location, it's located near Polaris. And it's right there. So what this really means is that an equatorial mount is an altazimuth mount where its vertical axis is pointed at the celestial pole.
So, quick recap. If you're sinking, for lack of a better term, if you're sinking two axes, an equatorial plane, flat plane, and a celestial pole axis, why would it work differently on a flat Earth? Or does it work better on a flat Earth than a spinning globe? Now, the alleged explanation on a spinning globe is that the spin is so slow relative to everything else that it's not noticeable and it'd be accurate enough. Whatever, maybe that's true. But if it's a flat plane, clearly you're just sinking two axes. So even though I do think an equatorial mount is one of the best arguments for the globe, if it would work theoretically with that spin, that still doesn't mean it's scientifically valid or it irrefutably proves a globe Earth because of what I just said here. If you're just sinking two predetermined axes and you're making adjustments based on that sink to track constellations or any star or whatever, why wouldn't you be able to do that on a flat plane? And would it work even better on a flat plane?
So what is the purpose of using an equatorial grid? Well, the advantage of this is that if you were to imagine a celestial sphere around the Earth, you would notice that the objects will appear to revolve around the celestial pole.
I like how he uses the words appear to revolve, as if he knows for sure they're not doing that.
I'll show you how that works if I were to fast forward this. You see that? The grid lines that are radiating from Polaris are what's called the right ascension lines. It takes 24 hours for one of these lines to make a full revolution. Therefore, a right ascension unit of measure from this point to this point is 1 hour of right ascension. Now, the advantage of using an equatorial mount is that if you were to, for example, have Vega in your field of view, you'll notice that Vega will start to drift a little bit.
Again, this is all based on predetermined synced axes, which would obviously you would also be able to do on a flat Earth. Possibly better. Again, I'm not going down that rabbit hole. But just for the people that think that this unequivocally is definitive, irrefutable proof, death nails, as the Goof Sartain says, that somehow it would prove something, you're predetermining two axes. And then you have, again, this cathedral or celestial sphere of rotation in relation to the synced axes. I mean, can it be made simpler? I mean, it really is simple.
But all you need to do in an equatorial mount is just to turn the right ascension knob, and Vega will go right back into your field of view. I'm going to do another example. Now I'm facing southeast, and I've got Arcturus and Mars. So remember, it doesn't matter which direction you're facing, your telescope will continue to follow the same motions in declination and right ascension.
Again, due to the predetermined synced axes.
So if, let's say, in your field of view you had Arcturus and you wanted to point it at Mars. So what I would do is first I would make around a 1 hour right ascension this way, and about what is this, 10, 20, about 20 degrees of declination to the south. Most equatorial mounts will come with what's called slow motion knobs. These allow you to make the fine adjustments so that you can track the objects quite easily.
Again, the adjustments based on the predetermined axes, the equatorial plane and Polaris.
One area of confusion is determining which motion is right ascension and which motion is declination. One way to determine that is as soon as you have your mount polar aligned, you should see Polaris in your eyepiece. Now, push your telescope over to the side in this motion, and as you look through your eyepiece, you should see Polaris relatively close within your field of view, because this motion is right ascension, and it tends to draw circles around Polaris. Now, when you move your telescope this way, Polaris will begin to move out of your field of view, because this motion is the declination motion as it tries to move towards the South Pole. Now, moving on to your slow motion knobs, you can do the same thing. Turn one knob, and if Polaris begins to move away from the field of view rapidly, this would be your declination knob. Get a sticker and stick it onto that knob. Now, your other slow motion knob is most likely going to be your right ascension knob. Get a sticker and stick it on there. One of the advantages of having an equatorial mount is that some models will allow you to install a right ascension motor drive, such as this one here. Now, those that support it will have a large cog opposite of the right ascension slow motion knob. And how you install it is there should be a mount like this one here. And as you mount it, the small cog on the motor will line up with the larger cog on the mount. And when you turn it on, it should turn your telescope in the right ascension direction at the same speed as the Earth's rotation. And what that does is that it'll keep the object within your field of view for a longer time without making manual adjustments. There's still going to be a few challenges to using your telescope on an equatorial mount, such as getting disoriented. For example, if you're using a finder scope that is image corrected, you look through the eyepiece, the objects seem to move in the correct direction. But when you look through your telescope's eyepiece, they seem to be moving in the opposite direction. Fortunately, the only way to solve this is to keep using your telescope. So go out there in the field, have a lot of fun, keep practicing.
All right, so let's get a little bit more technical now that we have the introduction. This video is how to really set up an equatorial mount.
This telescope is attached to an equatorial mount. This telescope is also attached to an equatorial mount. In this video, I'm going to use this telescope and a globe to show you how to properly set up and use this full-size equatorial mount. And later on in this video, I'll demonstrate the number one advantage of using an equatorial mount. For a long time, equatorial mounts have had a bad reputation as a hobby killer. Are they really that way? Well, hopefully at the end of this video, you might see things a little bit differently. Was it ever really fair to call this style of telescope mount a hobby killer? Well, admittedly, these aren't the easiest of mounts to set up, so for a lot of new telescope owners, it did cast a shadow on their first telescope experience. But thanks to the internet and YouTube, equatorial mounts no longer need to be the stumbling block between users and their new telescope. No matter what telescope you have, it only takes 2 movements to point it at your desired target in the sky. Now, as you can imagine, there are a few ways to combine these movements. In this simple example, we swing it to the left, to the right, and then we tilt it up until we have our target in sight. That side-to-side angle is called azimuth. It's measured from true north. This up and down angle is called altitude, where 0 degrees is horizontal and 90 degrees is vertical. For these simple telescope mounts, we call them alt-azimuth, or alt-az for short. Now, my favorite alt-az style of mount is the Dobsonian, as shown here. I sometimes call these the point-and-go telescopes. These alt-az telescopes have an inherent weakness, though. As the night sky spins, you have to keep moving your telescope.
As the night sky spins. Interesting.
In both angles to keep up. Also, the view itself does not rotate with the movement, which causes problems for long exposure astrophotography. And if you try to track a target across the absolute roof of the sky or the zenith, then you quickly find out how hard that can be. This region of the sky is sometimes jokingly referred to as Dobson's Hole. There is another type of mount system, and it's called the equatorial mount. It uses 2 angles as well, but they have very different names. The first is called the right ascension, and the right ascension angle is actually measured in hours. It goes from 0 all the way up to basically 24. You can see here where the point where it cycles over. The other angle or axis that you have is the declination angle, and it goes from basically minus 90 to 0 to plus 90. And it gives you the angle measured between the equatorial plane and the celestial poles. Now, I'm only telling you about these alternate angle systems to let you know that the system exists in the world of equatorial mounts. But for the rest of this video, we're going to focus on the physical side of setting up and using an equatorial mount. This is the last time you'll hear me talk about right ascension and declination angles. The main advantage of the equatorial mount is that once you have it set up, you can track your target with the adjustment of one single knob. And that only works because your equatorial axis is lined up or parallel with the Earth's axis.
Again, predetermining axes. So you're just picking these points, and then you have the rotation of the stars in relations to the points that you picked, presupposing the globe. Does that make it true? We'll get a little bit more specific in a moment.
Here is my simple 6-step formula for setting up any equatorial mount. I'm going to do most of this demonstration during the day so you can see what I'm doing, but in reality, you're going to have to do some of this at night because, as you'll soon see, it's all about the North Star.
All about the North Star, not the presupposed shape of the Earth or spin. Very interesting.
So the first step is to locate your equatorial mount in a location that has a pretty good view of the North Star. In my case, it's between that tree and that roof. Now, the North Star is the last star in the handle of the Little Dipper. That should help you find it. And it's very unique. It would seem that the entire sky is actually rotating around the North Star.
It would seem. And how would you know whether it was or wasn't?
And we're going to talk about that a little bit more in a minute. Now, once you have your location picked, do your best to aim this main polar axis to true north. Ideally, you would use the North Star as a guide, but you can also use a compass. You just have to know that true north is a little bit different from magnetic north. In fact, it can be quite a bit different depending on where you live. Step 3 is to level the mount, basically the top of the tripod part. Now, you can use a bubble level to do that, and that's what I'm going to do here. So here we see the bubble level. It needs to tilt up this way. So I'll unloosen this leg and lift it up. Oop. That's pretty good. I'm going to tighten the leg. It needs to come a little bit the other way. So there we go. And just a little bit of tweaking here. And we're good. Step 4 is polar alignment, what I like to call what's your latitude. All right, this is the big one. Equatorial mounts take advantage of the fact that all objects seem to rise in the east and set in the west.
Seem to.
Effectively spinning around the North Star. Now, for our intents and purposes, we're going to consider the North Star to be pretty constant. It does move a little bit, but we're going to assume that it is a constant in the night sky. The North Star goes by several different names. It goes by Polaris, and it goes by the Pole Star. That's a lot of names, but you may see it written different ways in different books. Now, for those of you that live in the southern hemisphere, there is a southern pole star called Polaris Australis. Unfortunately, it's pretty dim, but if you can see it, if you can find it, then you can use that star to align your polar axis. Okay, so we have to point the polar axis of the equatorial mount at the North Star. And this all works because of a cosmic coincidence that has enabled navigators for hundreds of years, if not longer, to determine their latitude.
A cosmic coincidence. The ultimate coincidence, and statistically in an infinite universe, what are the chances of this coincidence actually happening? Just a question. I'm not claiming anything is true or untrue. This is Mind Shack.
And it's all based on a very weird bit of geometry.
That's a good explanation. It's scientific.
Here we have the Earth, and it's spinning about its own axis. Now, I know the real one's tilted a little bit, but I've straightened it up just for this explanation. Now, if you were to take the axis and you were to extend it out the top of the planet and keep going and keep going and keep going for about 434 light years, well, then you would end up near a star called Polaris.
What a coincidence! While all this is hurling through the universe at unimaginable speeds.
It's not exactly on the axis, of course, but it's close enough for our purposes. And at that far distance, some very funny math happens. So the Earth's radius is around 4,000 miles. Let's draw a little section of the Earth. So here's the core. This is, let's say this is the equator up here. And this is the North Pole. So I've got it tilted on its side. Okay. So the radius from the center, let's say the radius is around 4,000 miles, roughly. Okay, now let's draw a line from the core out the axis to a temporary spot out here. I'm going to connect these. These are all just rough. You'll notice that basically this is a big right triangle here, 90 degrees. Now, if I were to grab this point right here on the triangle and start pulling and pulling and pulling and keep dragging this a distance until I got to Polaris, I'd be about 2,500 trillion miles away. And at that distance, something funny happens here locally to the geometry. And that is that the legs of these triangles become functionally parallel. All right? The Polaris is so far.
And is that a funny thing, or is that just exactly matching up to a flat Earth plane, of which the equatorial plane on the equatorial mount is a predetermined axis aligning to the Polaris axis?
Far that way that these two lines are effectively parallel. So what does this mean to an observer on Earth? This means that no matter where you're standing, at least in the northern hemisphere, if you point in what you perceive as the north direction of the North Star, your arm will be pointing parallel to the Earth's axis. Let's say you're about halfway up the Earth, and you do the same thing. You point towards the North Star. Well, you're pointing parallel to the Earth's axis.
And here's just a question. How coincidental is it? It just happens. In all of infinite universe and infinite distances, it just so happens that all of this works out perfectly parallel.
And again, once you get to the North Pole, it probably goes without saying, but I'll say it. If you point your arm towards the North Star, you're pointing parallel to the Earth's axis.
What a coincidence that on a flat Earth it would end up the exact same way.
Because of this, the measured angle between your local horizon and the North Star is simply going to be your latitude. Sailors have long measured this angle with a tool called a sextant. And it's been very popular for navigators, even some aerial navigators in the early days of aviation used the sextant if they could get a stable measurement of the horizon and the North Star from their airplane. Now, let's have an example here. Let's say you are trying to find the North Star and you're somewhere on the equator, okay? So you're standing at the equator and you try to find the North Star. You look for the last star in the handle of the Little Dipper, and you find it, and you discover that it's basically on the horizon. It's at about 0 degrees above the horizon. Well, that works out, doesn't it? Because your telescope is parallel with the Earth's axis, and
it just so happens to work out. Just so happens. Just so happens.
that means if you're standing right here, then it's going to look like it's right on the horizon. Now, as the traveler takes a long trip and goes all the way up the Earth and heads up towards the top, he has to keep tilting his telescope higher and higher. And by the time he gets to the true North Pole, where the axis exits the Earth, his telescope is pointing straight up from the ground. And that means his latitude is around 90 degrees. Now, of course, if we go about, let's say down here, let's say we're at...
And just for the people that are not understanding the concept here as it relates to flat Earth, if you're in a giant warehouse and you have a light in the middle of the warehouse and you're moving all these miles away from the middle, so there'd be the angle that you'd have to point your telescope to see the light in the middle, and then as you get to the middle, the light would be pointing straight up, exactly like he just demonstrated on the globe there as well.
The region called Texas, and we're in Texas, and you'll want to point your telescope at the North Star. You're going to have an angle with the relative ground with the horizon, that's about, say 30 degrees, I would say. Now, I have a confession to make. I looked this up on Google Maps, and it's actually around 32-ish degrees. And if you look at this, this angle is pretty similar to the one that I have when I set it up out in the driveway. So the first step for polar alignment is to just know your latitude. One of the easiest ways to find your latitude is to open up Google Maps. So go to your web browser and type in maps.google.com and zoom in and keep zooming until you get to a location that is close to basically where you're at. And then right click the mouse button and a little menu pops up. And the two numbers at the top are the latitude and the longitude. And it's the number on the left, the latitude, that we are interested in. With the tripod leveled and everything pointed generally in the north direction, we know our latitude. In our case, it's about between 32 and 33 degrees. We're going to look here on the latitude dial, and we're going to make sure that this white arrow points as close as we can to 32 degrees. In this case, it looks like it's pointed around 38. So I'm going to turn this knob until it gets to around 32. And then we'll go a little bit, well, between 32 and 34. That's pretty good. A lot of equatorial mounts have the special feature, so we'll remove the cap down there. This allows you to look straight through the polar axis towards the North Star. And we will make sure that the North Star is basically right in the middle. This is a great time if you have a polar scope to use it. A polar scope is like a little telescope that has a transparency overlaid on it that shows you the location of Polaris and some of the other pertinent items that will help you make it perfectly aligned. Here's what you see when you look through a true polar scope. In the middle is the plus sign, and that shows the true central axis. Note that Polaris, or the North Star, is actually a little bit off. In fact, the path that it traces is a little circle that goes tightly around the true central axis, the true center of the spinning sky. There's a couple of little helper graphics here that tell you how to orient this.
Everybody catch that? The spinning sky?
You basically line it up on Polaris. Polaris will actually be shining through this view, and you'll want to get it so that the Big Dipper is off in the general direction that it says, and also that Cassiopeia is off in the general direction. So this polar scope helps you get really zeroed in on perfect true north. If you need to go left or right, there's a couple of screws on the front. This guy and this guy, they are opposing each other, but they will lock down. So use those to move the whole head left and right to get perfect polar alignment on the North Star. Step 5 is to attach the telescope to your equatorial mount and then balance it. So let's go ahead and attach it. You can certainly do this ahead of time, but it's sometimes very heavy to do so. This telescope has an old mount system. Yours may have a newer ring system or Vixen dovetail, which is pretty nice. So let's go ahead and attach this. There we go, all done. Now you need to balance it for your particular telescope. Go ahead and loosen up the lock on the polar axis. This way, it can rotate. And you want to adjust this weight back and forth. Be very careful though. It can flop around. You want to adjust this weight to make sure it's perfectly balanced. So that's not balanced. You want it to be neutrally balanced technically. So adjust this weight until it pretty much stays where you put it. Let's try it. That's pretty good. We'll call this balanced. Now at this point, all you have to do is point your telescope at your target. It can seem a little bit awkward with all these movements, and if you unlock everything, it can be spinning everywhere, right? A little bit awkward. But there's really only two primary axes that you're worried about, and they each have a lock nut on them. But once you get it dialed in on your target, you lock these down, then you make very fine movements with these flexible knobs, all right? Now, if you get everything polar aligned, which I know you have already, then you only need to move this knob, which is the one that moves it along the polar axis.
So again, with these predetermined axes, why would it work different on a flat plane? Or does it? Because if you're just using the equatorial plane, are we really just splitting hairs here?
I believe that's called the right ascension axis. Now, there's often two different ways to look at the same target. And this is where it gets a little bit weird with the equatorial mount. You can point it like this, or you can rotate it around, and you can point it like this. Both ways are pointed towards the same target. Just pick the one that is most convenient for you, especially for your eyepiece. You might have to do some rotating on your eyepiece holder. But also another thing to keep in mind is which one is going to run out of room first, because if this one goes too far, it's going to run into its own mount. So you might want to start all the way over here, and then as the night goes on, you'll have a lot more play because you'll have this whole amount of free rotation. Pick the one that won't run out of movement as soon. Then lock these in, and again, you only have to turn the polar axis or the right ascension knob. One thing to be very careful about is the eyepiece. Make sure the eyepiece is locked in. And if you happen to do a big rotation, be very careful, because there's the chance that you may get to an orientation where the eyepiece falls out. Don't let that happen. You don't want to destroy an eyepiece just because you were trying to move the telescope around. Now, just to summarize that main single advantage of the equatorial mount, and that is that when you have everything lined up, you can track your object in the sky just by turning this knob slowly. Now, there are ways to motorize this axis as well to make it automatic, and that works pretty well too. But again, if you're having a star party and people are saying, hey, it moved out of the view, well, you just turn this knob a little bit and it's going to pop back into view.
Okay, so there you have it. So just one more definition real quick, just to summarize. Equatorial plane, I mean, just straight from Merriam-Webster, the plane perpendicular to the spindle of a dividing cell and midway between the poles. So that's the general definition. In specific to astronomy, the plane that passes through the Earth's equator, or by extension, the equators of other celestial bodies. So this equatorial plane could theoretically be the flat Earth plane. So there wouldn't be a difference using the equatorial mount. Everybody following? It's literally that simple. Okay. So just to summarize this so-called debate, basically I would say, again, hugely disappointed in David Whitehead, although he still might be the best individual that ever actually ran the debate or, on his platform. So, yeah, but he's just the most disappointing as well, just very ill-prepared, not understanding the basics, and the Josh guy, of course, a mentally disabled individual, nothing much you can do there. But I would say one of the flaws on the side of Nathan and Patrick is that, for whatever reason, they thought Whitehead was more prepared than he was, and they, for whatever reason, thought Josh was actually capable of understanding simple scientific concepts or any kind of concepts. Clearly he wasn't, but they spent so much time. I mean, they should have really talked more to the audience than directly to Josh or even David, because David didn't even... If David doesn't even understand Apparent Horizon versus True Horizon, I mean, he just wasted all those hours. A lot of these debates, I mean, all these countless hours could be saved if they just opened with how dependent independent variables are clearly defined as well as controls. Clearly. What separates a scientific from a non-scientific experiment. And just the basic fallacies, just absolute basics. False dichotomy, false cause, straw man, reification, reductive logical fallacies, as if saying, oh, it's literally this simple, and then stacking that on the false dichotomy, it's either this or that, while strawmanning a model never claimed. It's like they stack all these basic fallacies. So if they could prove and demonstrate they understand the fallacies and the scientific method as it pertains to dependent, independent variables and controls, then you have the discussion. If they can't do that, what's the point of even spending all these hours? So hopefully the Mind Shock listeners won't request another one like this, although this one was very educational for all those different reasons. So, yeah, it wasn't a bad thing per se, but I'd prefer to analyze debates where there's actually some kind of grasp of something by both sides. So, yeah, there you have it. But I'll analyze whatever. I mean, if the Mind Shock listeners want it, I'll do it. I aim to please, and clearly there's still plenty to be learned, even from debates, so-called debates as this. I would just prefer something where there's just more understanding of both sides to make it a little bit more interesting. But there you have it. Hope everybody enjoyed another edition of the Mind Shock podcast and analyzing this debate that just won't go away and provides endless hilarity for those that appreciate Dunning-Kruger stylings. If you want to help support the Mind Shock podcast, the only podcast objectively, logically, and neutrally examining this topic as well as all these other topics, you can donate to our PayPal. Just check the link in the description. You can also become a YouTube member right here on YouTube. Help support the channel that way. Like and share Twitter, Facebook, Reddit, Patreon. Patrons do get priority for case topic logical analysis for podcast requests. You can also be a guest on the podcast depending on your tier. Questions, comments, theories, thoughts, suggestions, rebuttals, debunkings of any kind, leave them in the comment section. This is Bruce McGuire signing off. Catch you guys next time.